Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 217. So glad you could join me. It's a special night on the eve of Halloween. We're going to have an especially spooky episode with some creepy open lines coming up at the end. If you have a scary poem and would like to share, usually we do the prompt poems at the open lines, but we'll have that, which is a poem based on fear. But if you have any poems at all that relate to Halloween or scariness or spookiness or creepiness or anything you want to share, do jump in the open lines at the second half of the show. We'll be giving out the Zoom link then. Today's guest is Christina Kallery, who is the host of a paranormal podcast in addition to being a poet. So it'll be really fun to talk to her in just a little bit. But right now, we'd like to start out with our opening poem, which is from the news. And this week we have Katherine Hagopian Berry here to talk about maybe Lewiston. Hey, Katherine, how you doing?
Hi, thanks, Tim. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I mean, of course, as it so often is for Poets Respond, it's unpleasant circumstances because it's a bad story that took place very nearby you. I'm sure most people are familiar with the mass shooting and what happened in Maine over the week. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you found out about the story and how it affected your life before we share the poem?
So one of the really, I guess, most startling things about this is that the poem is really quite accurate. My family and I were in the Auburn Travel Center about an hour and a half before it happened, and we didn't know it. We passed some emergency vehicles. We were heading north, going south, and didn't really understand what was going on and really only found out that night. And our home is Bridgeton, which is about an hour outside of Lewiston. So to be that close, we were in the sister city, we were in the Auburn half. It felt like there had to have been a reason why I was that close. And when the poem started to arrive, that felt like a reason that maybe the story that the poem had to tell was important enough. And I was able to be there to tell it. It feels like a somber privilege, right?
Yeah.
To be able to tell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me, years ago we published a poem by Molly Fisk called Violence Fractal about I think it might have been after the Las Vegas shooting, maybe. And just the idea that as these things happen over and over again, they get closer and closer to each of us individually or someone we love. And that sort of, you feel that when it's, Maine is somewhere you think of as not a thing where like not much happens. And to have something like this happen like so close to you must be very frightening. How did you find out a way to enter the poem? I mean, that's always the difficult thing. It's really easy to write sort of, political polemic type poems for Poets Respond and things like that. But it's really hard to access a poem in a way that's not just preaching to the choir, that's engaging with it in an actual, creative, poetic way that's like digging into, what's actually going on in your deeper feelings and the psychology surrounding it and all that. How did you find a way to do that with a poem where, there's been so many poems written, I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands about mass shootings. How did you find a way to enter this in a unique way?
Part of that I think is listening to how the poem decides to start arriving. For me, the first moment I got an inkling there was a poem there was when I was looking out my window. And I just kept noticing the leaves on the trees. Like that detail ends up in the poem at the very end, and how they were the color of the track suit that the suspect was wearing in the photograph. It was like all I could see as I was in the car coming home once I knew was either being afraid and frightened and like looking for danger or things that reminded me of danger, and the pervasiveness of danger and how it can color everything that surrounds you was my way in.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job of writing it. Let's hear the poem now. It's Maybe Lewiston, whenever you're ready.
Maybe Lewiston. Maybe we will see Katahdin, we tell our children. Maybe we will see a moose. Pulling over at the Lewiston Travel Center, trucks at the tagging station, hunting season just beginning. Death like a warm meal. Death like a family reunion. Death like a game. We always take precautions hiking, blaze orange hats in the back of the car. Once a woman weeding her garden was mistaken for a deer. Death like a stray bullet. Death like a mistake. Inside the Circle K, everyone is grabbing whoopie pies and hot slices. My son wants a Halloween skull. We tell him there will be plenty of time for souvenirs. Death like a pirate. Death like a clown. Heading north, the road is empty. Ambulance screaming in the other direction. Police cars, helicopter searchlight, desperate circling. What's happening? I wonder. Someone is lost, my husband answers. Death like a whisper. Death like a broken mirror. Death like a Passover prayer. We are too late to see Katahdin. Past the turn-off scenic view, we keep right on driving. I imagine a moose behind the dark trees watching, a sign to stay grounded. Death like a book gently closing. Death like a leaf softening the ground. We find out that night. First thing in the morning, detouring past Lewiston, I keep searching the woods for meaning. Amber leaves, a tracksuit. Frost, a car of interest. Shadow, a man with a gun. Death in the passenger seat. Death on manhunt. Death still at large. Death on the run.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful poem, really well done. Look at something really difficult that we all have to in this world. That death like a leaf softening the ground is such a beautiful line too. That was one of the things that sold it for me. It's almost a poem in and of itself. Thanks so much for being here, Katherine, and sharing that. And so glad that the guy was caught and it's over now.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. Yeah, that was Katherine Hagopian Berry with Maybe Lewiston, this week's poet on Poets Respond. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Christina Kallery, so sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry.
Ready?
And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Christina Kallery. Christina is the author of Adult Night at Skate World. We got to publish the title poem of that way back in, I don't know when it was, 2008, 2009, something like that. It's a wonderful book. She's also the co-host of the Shadowlands Paranormal podcast. So a really fun guest to have the night before Halloween. They've done around, I think, 80 episodes looking at all sorts of paranormal and creepy and spooky stuff. It's going to be really fun talking to her about that and her book. Her poetry has appeared all over the place, too. The Collagist, Gargoyle, Failbetter, Mudlark, other places like that. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan and has served as submissions editor for Absinthe, the Journal of World Literature. She currently lives in Detroit. And here she is, Christina Kallery. Hey, Christina, how you doing?
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. I'm so excited and really honored to be here tonight.
Yeah, well, so glad to have you here. It's the first time I've had a host of another podcast on the show. So I'm wondering, how it's going to feel being on the other side of the camera or other side of the aisle.
I feel a little naked without my headphones and my mic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, why don't we start out with the first poem, which is the title poem that we published. And to correct the record, it was 2005, so even older than I thought.
Way back. It's like an OG poem for me. It's very meaningful, not only because it got published in one of my favorite journals ever, Rattle, but also because I feel like this poem kind of marked a point in time for me as a writer where I feel like I found my voice in a lot of ways. I was in a writing group back then with a friend of mine who's an amazing poet, Robert Fanning. And he actually helped me workshop this one until I got it to the point where I felt like I was ready, and you guys picked it up, and I'm so grateful. Adult night at Skate World. You'd think it was an 8th grade dance, the way we stand shyly eyeing each other when the first slow notes sound for couples skate. A 50-ish man in a striped headband and custom skates fit with blinking lights asks, would I mind? So we roll from the worn carpet onto the glossy floor. One hand on my waist, he gazes at a far wall and sings in high, quivering tones to Endless Love. We pass a dozen other couples, office managers in sports shirts, single mothers squeezed into new jeans, and a few lone ones gliding through the tide of clasped hands. Take the handsome man with dark hair swept like a raven's wings from its stern middle part, the mustache trimmed to a neat M dash. He moves like a figure skater, one long leg aloft behind his jumpsuited frame. No woman here tonight can match his prowess as he weaves easy figure eights, turns and sails backwards without a glance. Though I imagine his likely office job, manning some cubicle in a gray and taupey sea, in the gaping dark that crouches nightly at his door. Now, the rink's Robert Plant commands the floor, beneath a silver disco orb, and twirls once, twice, a third time, pretending not to watch us, watching him. In his prime in 85, that bleached mass of frizzed out curls would have bobbed radiant under hot stage lights during the guitar solo, his attention wrapped to the arted hand, yet aware as a preening animal of the lip-glossed girls in the front row whose eyes simmered with envy and desire. But the gigs have fizzled into soundlessness. The Dodge van scrapped. The red guitar lies long untuned in its velvet chamber. Yet each Sunday at 8, he pulls the black skates from their nook and somehow finds a rhythm not unlike rock and roll in this dim-lit dome with its carnival colors and claw machine and women fluffing their hair and restroom mirrors. Just overhead hover the sour divorces, languished careers, botched plans, those hours when life took a sharp turn toward the inscrutable and left us older and daunted in its wake. But when the DJ calls the night's last song, we, the lonesome and afraid, the jaded and lost, peer through strobe lights for somebody, if not lovable, then not a lunatic, and sing to a tune we first heard the summer someone else left, and we wept against a cool steering wheel and felt the world spin, fierce and marvelous, beneath our feet.
Yeah, it's a great poem with a great ending, too, from Rattle number 24. That was Adult Night at Skate World by Christina Kallery, the title poem to her chapbook. And it's interesting thinking about that, looking back at, now 18 years later, I have friends on the dating scene and everything is like swipe left and swipe right. I think it's sad that there's no more Skate World. There's no more places.
There is though. I went back and I took the photo for the book. They're still happening in different places all around the country. And actually, I think roller skating has had a resurgence recently, like for adults.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
But to your point, yes, in the dating world, a lot of things are sadly online and in the app swipe right or left sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a throwback to a different time. I have a friend who is looking for, somebody, and I told him that he should join a church. I thought that was his only way to actually meet people these days, because we don't even work in the same room as people anymore. And so, how would you do that? So tell us a little bit about the chapbook. What was it that made you put this together as a collection of poems?
Well, this was something that was on my list for a long time, and kind of a late bloomer, sort of, I guess, true to form for me. I had been publishing poems in different journals for years, and it had always been in the back of my mind, but different things in my life got in the way. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017, and that lit a fire under my butt to get going and to get serious about something that I feel is like central to my identity and to who I am, and has been the most important part of my life, I think, in a lot of ways as a writer. Which some every people who listen and love poetry will understand that, but to a lot of people it sounds very strange because there's no money in it. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of poets don't like it. There's that famous line, I too dislike it. But for me, it feels like when you pare back the onion of the meaningful things that you can say as a writer in this world, to me, it's at the center of my heart. So that was a very long-winded way of answering that. I finally assemble these poems and put them into book form, and that's how it came to be.
Yeah, well, it's a great book, and so you do so many different things, with the paranormal podcast that we'll talk more about later, but also writing, freelancing for fashion magazines too, and then writing poetry as well. How is it that poetry fits into the nexus of all of that? It's quite a variety of things to do. You don't see many people into the paranormal plus the other things too.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done any writing for magazines in a little while. Although I love magazines. I always have since I was a kid. But I do copywriting for advertising, and I have like an area of specialization in beauty. Although I've done a lot of automotive too, being in Detroit. I honestly feel like poetry at its essence is about trying to kind of distill everything down to this core meaning and pare down, the sense of things, capture them in as few words as possible. And, in a lot of ways, although not every poet subscribes to that philosophy, but that's definitely, I think, I see that play out in different aspects of my writing, in work. I'll tap my poetry sensibilities to be able to come up with something that's like a little more like of an anthem, or, when I want to describe something, say if I am doing a story for a magazine, I find that like trying to reach for words that might be, a little less expected, to paint a picture. It's definitely something that I feel like I don't necessarily stop being a poet at any point in time, and I feel like with the paranormal, there definitely is this convergence because they're both like an attempt to describe and engage with the mysteries of life and consciousness and like the ineffable. So, it might seem at first glance like, oh, this is like really strange and so far removed. But there's like a long history of poets that, the romantic poets and Keats and Poe and, many poets. I think Whitman had one that bordered on the paranormal. They're not at odds with each other. I think they're very much at home together.
Yeah, I think a lot about the Rattle Young Poets anthology that we do, and how that imagination that young poets have is so much a part of poetry. It's like we're all as adults trying to find that magic space where things can just flower up out of your mind that didn't exist before, and then you can enter that, and it's a whole world as real as the world that we're living in now. And then what we don't think about too is the dark side of that, because the frightening things are also just as real as they are now, and so it's sort of there's a way to go back to that, but it's a way that includes all the stuff we used to be afraid of too. So that's really interesting. We should talk more about that in a little bit, but let's share another poem from the book. And we're going to be moving through, which is kind of interesting. We're going to be moving through links, because you sent a bunch of links to the poems, and so we can see where they were published too. Swan Falls in Love with Swan-Shaped Boat is next up, and this was published on failbetter.com. And so it's always neat to look at other literary magazines too. But let's hear this poem, Christina.
Okay. All right. And I always think of this poem as like a found poem because it came about. I was basically just surfing the web one day. I was trying to write. I was kind of blocked, and I had a reading coming up, and I came across this headline, when I was procrastinating, and it jumped out at me, and I just had this immediate sense that if I don't write this poem, somebody else is going to get to it first. I've got to do it. And the poem came to me. Katherine was talking about a poem arriving, and this one, like, the arrival point was just as soon as I saw this headline, and it was Swan Falls in Love with Swan-Shaped Boat. And it starts out with an epigram from Reuters. Dateline Berlin, a swan has fallen in love with a plastic swan-shaped paddle boat on a pond in the German town of Munster and has spent the past 3 weeks flirting with the vessel 5 times its size, a sailing instructor said Friday. I felt like this was very relatable, at least for me. He's not half nuts, this German swan. To love something so near the actual, you might squint from shore, squishing sand beneath your toes to see its broad white belly part the shining green, neck angled always toward the clouds, deflecting every antic of its frenzied mini-suitor. This happens, right? Who among us with a single red corpuscle hasn't dug in and waded the whole doomed thing to its conclusion? Wanting some chill beauty to paddle its slow turn toward us on the man-made lake. In your case, not a Munster tourist boat, let's hope, but more like the narcissist with lovely eyes and a voice to unzip things to, or the one that cut the right profile, but sank like a Petoskey stone. But still, in spite of tear stains, sucker punches, fist to the glass jaw, the dumb heart beats, then tries again. See, there he goes, beak agog and hissing at the rival birds, wings spread to seem more menacing, black-webbed feet paddling frantic through the algae. Then night sets, and a silver moon beams down on bird and boat, afloat alone, and in the pale light looking, for all the world, like the shape of love.
Yeah, another great poem. That was Swan Falls in Love with Swan-Shaped Boat, which is a great headline. Whoever wrote that headline did a wonderful job with it. And it's just a poem asking to be happen. I think you definitely were the first person to it. But
there was a part 2, because actually they took away the paddle boat and then they reunited the depressed swan with the boat later.
Really?
So I kind of written the second poem.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it just sometimes those headlines just make the poems happen. And we were talking about for the Poets Respond opening section about how, it's sort of easy to write political poems, but there's so many other stories out there in the world that you can write poems about. And so we always encourage people to include poems just like this. If there's a strange story and it sparks your imagination, write a poem about it. So you mentioned doing copywriting, and I'm always curious about the relationship between copywriting and advertising and poetry, because there's a way that you want to engage people and have them have a reaction and have it be contained in something that moves them and makes them do something, which is the same thing you want as poetry. But there's also a way that, like, poetry, for whatever reason, like you already mentioned, doesn't have the audience of the general public. I mean, most people don't like. To me, I feel like poetry triggers a lot of cognitive dissonance because it's pushing against your preconceived models of the world. And advertising, I think you kind of can't really do that. So I'm always curious about there's a way that they're similar and there's a way that they're different. So how much do you use, poetry within advertising, and what's the relationship between writing copy for one and poems for the other?
Well, actually, I do use it quite a bit. There are these exercises that we do a lot of times if we're trying to come up with like a larger concept for a campaign, and they're called manifestos, and it's exactly what you think. It's like sort of this anthemic kind of thing, and it at its essence is a poem. And I know when you say advertising, it's easy to be cynical. It's easy to kind of write everything off as just this like crass materialism. But honestly, I look at it more as a writer, as an exercise in trying to get to the heart of what it is that will kind of stir the emotions. And I often bring in like poetry, even like kind of phrases or lines or words that I've been thinking of, and kind of like reference them the same way that I would do when I'm writing an actual poem, when I'm writing these manifestos. And I've actually written stuff before that's made me tear up. I try to I guess, keep it authentic as much as I can, although that's not always possible when you're doing something and it's marketing, and commerce. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's like anything else. I think like you can find poetry or the inspiration for a poem, like you were just saying, in the everyday, in a billboard, in a snippet of dialogue you hear in the grocery store, and you never know where a poem's going to strike you. And so I feel like it's kind of just, if you have that awareness, and you keep yourself kind of open, then I think it can kind of flow back and forth. Both my parents were teachers, and there's a part of me that feels like maybe, I miss my calling a bit. But I do enjoy working with younger writers and, helping them kind of like craft their writing. But teaching it's a calling in itself, and it's a very difficult job. And I saw that firsthand growing up.
So when did you know you wanted to be a poet? When was the interest in that kindled? Was it at a young age with your parents as teachers, or was it later on?
Yeah, I grew up around books. My parents, read to me. They got divorced at a young age, and I primarily lived with my mom. But she always read to me. We'd go to the library. We'd get out. I still remember 12 books. That was the maximum we could get. I wanted to get as many books as we could. So we always got the 12. And then she'd read to me. And I grew up in Marquette, Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula, which is a very like rural town. It's very cold, very long winters. And so we'd get into bed at night and snuggle up under the covers, and she'd read me a bedtime story. And so, reading and stories really came alive for me then. And I would say with poetry, it kind of started young. I mean, I remember writing it in grade school, but I think it really started in my like early teen years when I started getting into, I remember like going through my mom's old English lit books and finding like murder ballads and creepy stuff. And a teacher had read us The Telltale Heart at Halloween, and I fell in love with Poe. And so I was reading Annabelle Lee and Romeo and Juliet. And I think it just kind of, I was very much a romantic, and I also had a creepy side, I think, back then, an interest in the paranormal and ghost stories and all of that. And so that's where I really found sort of like this home in poetry, I think. And then but I still I wrote stories ever since I was a little kid. I think my first story that I ever did was before I could actually read and write, and so I just drew pictures, and if it was of these two sisters that went and stole treasure from monsters in a cave. So I guess the sensibility was like there. But when I got to college, I kind of intended to go into fiction, and I had a teacher that really brought poetry to life for us. And for better or worse, that's the road I turned down, and I didn't look back.
Well, let's hear another poem from Adult Night Skate World. The next one up is Burnouts, a Detroit poem from Digging Through the Fat, which is at diggingpress.com. Another interesting journal to take a look at. But let's hear this poem.
Okay. So the high school that I went to was in Downriver, Detroit, Southgate High School, and they were basically it's a working class neighborhood. At least it was at the time. I'm assuming it still is. And basically, there were two groups of kids. You could be in the burnouts, or you could be the jocks. You can guess which ones were the more popular, like cool kids. I was sort of, there were also like a few floating, like kind of artsy weirdos. I was one of those, but you can kind of tell from this poem whose side I was on. Because one day, actually, and it made the local paper, the jocks and the burnouts had like a rumble. Like there was an actual fight that broke out between the two groups. There was a lot of tension there. You know, the jocks thought they were a lot better. You know, burnouts it was like, it's that old story, you know, from the other side of the tracks, or, you know. So anyway, it starts out with a quote from Heavy Metal Parking Lot, a documentary it's wonderful. If you haven't seen it yet, it's very short. And it says, "There's enough burnouts out there to go hands across America." And then a quote from Lita Ford. "I went to a party last Saturday night. I didn't get laid. I got in a fight." You'd see them rolling joints in class, textbook prop to hide the task, feathered hair fringing their eyes, a starter mustache shadowing their upper lips. Always a few hanging out on empty bleachers, trading swigs from something bottom shelf in a paper bag. And always the jagged lettered logos of their concert tees, their suede boots like the ones worn by the guy in 7th Hour Fine Arts. He pulled them on every day, in snowbound December and blazing June, laced to the knee over jeans tight as snakeskin, belt buckle shaped like a woman's clutching hand, forever poised just short of third base, a heavy metal send-up of the poet's Grecian urn. I never knew his name, but I recall his cloud gray half-mast eyes, his Bic-penned scrawls of fiery skulls and undead guitarists, his public makeouts with some girl by the acrylic paints. He'd float through hallways, an apathetic ghost, gliding onward to its dead-end job, jail term, or other bad term. But it would be sweet justice if he dodged the old cliches and got by okay. It would be a flipped bird from the window of a black Camaro they said would never make it off the blocks. Watch it peel onto the entrance ramp, rebuilt engine roaring, to catch the last gleam of sunlight fading fast behind the trees.
Yeah, another great story that was Burnouts by Christina Kallery. And it's very clear, like looking at these three poems we've seen already, that you're really focused on narrative in your poems, and the storytelling is the main aspect. People will see later when I was trying to tell a story in my open mic poem coming up, I don't understand how to do that. I have trouble with narratives in poems. How do you approach a poem from that perspective of storytelling? I mean, the key seems to be not letting anybody get bored. You know, I mean, you really have to tell a story in a way that's engaging the whole time. But how do you approach storytelling? How do you know when this is a story you're going to tell? And then when you sit down to write it, how do you approach telling that story?
You know, honestly, I kind of feel like, and it's something that I heard you say in another interview where you talk about just kind of having this recognition moment of something being poetic. And I feel like it kind of, for me, it hinges. There's something where I was like, oh yeah, that's a poem, that's a poem, that's a poem. And I like write it down. But in a way, like I envy what you're describing, because I feel like the lyricism, I think it's you know, in a lot of ways, it's the highest form of poetry. It's when you let go of that control. And I feel like for me, there's a struggle between the narrative and the lyric. And I bring them together, but I think that probably comes out of how I kind of got my start, which was sort of writing these, short stories or writing a lot of more like fictional stuff. And then it kind of later on merged with poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it's just kind of like how I write, but I envy the ability to just completely let go of everything, of all the guardrails, and just free fall.
Yeah, well, everybody, envies the other side, because I just, knowing the story, I have real trouble like conveying a story that I already know in a way that is engaging. So when you have a story like Burnouts, like you recognize you want to write a poem like that, like what do you physically do? Like, do you sit down and write notes about it, do you like brainstorm like one of those manifestos you were talking about in the marketing meetings, or do you just let yourself go, with the narrative of the story? Like, how do you go about a narrative poem?
Honestly, it'll just be like a lot of times I'll jot down a note. It'll be like an idea, like whether it's like a working title, or sometimes it'll be like because another thing I've always loved and that has been close to my heart is music. And I feel like that's so important to poetry. And a lot of times there'll be like kind of like a little, like a phrase or something that sort of floats through my mind. And I'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. This could be a poem. And I write that down, so it's just like sort of an assemblage of different notes. And then, when I sit down to write something, you can kind of tell early on if I need to put this aside for a while or maybe forever, or if it's something that I can make into something longer and like more of a finished product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's do another poem. All right. Let's do. This is a good transition poem. I think from the last from the book, let's do Harvest Moon on Trash Night, which is a little bit of a transition for Halloween. And this is from Sundress Publications magazine Stirring. So why don't you read that?
Okay. Hauling out the last black hefty bag, I spot the full moon fat as a lemon bundt cake above the dumpsters. 3 stray cats dart into spindly elms that split the reeking bins from the railroad tracks beyond. At night, steel freighters thunder through here, jittering loose windows, sounding their low drone that strikes the heart's anvil like longing. This is the sort of place you live when you don't know where to go. Young couples dreaming lifetimes in their first shared beds, guys who know too much about kung fu films, or the just divorced getting by between visitation Sundays. I've grown to hate this sameness, the nowhere feel of modest brick, communal lawn plots, strip malls of the soul. But tonight, the big moon stops me cold, haloing the slate October sky and wisped by clouds, like the sky one autumn years ago, after a nightmare kept me up. My mother laced her boots and walked with me around our northern town to help me sleep, down past dark houses to the street of empty shops that faced the shore. Far below, I knew, black waves of Lake Superior rushed the rocky crags. In the quiet night that already smelled of snow, we heard the constant churning undertow. The moon looked near enough to touch the unleafed limbs, or if I stretched my palm, I might feel its scarred and dusty face, so many miles from home.
Yeah, it's another great poem, Harvest Moon on Trash Night. I thought it was a great example of what poetry kind of does, is these moments that break us out of the sameness of life. And that's what a poem is usually about, is that there's something special about a moment. And you can even look at something like haiku, as small as that is, and there's something special there. And that Harvest Moon on Trash Night is a perfect metaphor for how the poetry works. So you do the Shadowland Paranormal podcast, which is just a fascinating direction to go, being a poet. And there is something, you mentioned romantic before, and there's something romantic about the paranormal at the same time. What do you think that connection is? Because it is, like, if you think of the Romantic era, there is a sort of love poetry side to it. And then there's this like darker side of creepiness that you get with people like Poe or Emily Dickinson, others like that, So what is it that the two have in common? Why is there this sort of synergy between the two?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I mean, yeah, I think that there's something about being drawn to places that others might scorn or look at as ugly or abandoned or run down or ruined, but seeing kind of like the beauty and decay, and also feeling that the urgency. And there's like this tension between love on the one hand and death on the other. And I don't know. What do you think? That's a great question. I'm sort of spitballing here, but
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about I don't know, the unknown and the
Mhm.
desire for more than what we have in our existence right now. It seems to me is the key to it. It's like reaching beyond the sameness, the mundane. Is sort of what romantic is in all of its manifestations, and one of them is that darker side of the coin. If there is a world which is full of ghosts and goblins and demons and ravens that know you're about to die and all those things, that means that there's more to the reality than just the monotony of like having to go to work and get a job and finding food, and doing all those day-to-day things that we all have to do. It means that we're living in a bigger place. And I think that maybe is the thing that have in common, is that reaching for something that's like grand. I think there's something grand in both, ghost stories and something grand in love stories. I think maybe that would be my guess as to what is
Yeah.
in common. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way of putting it. It's like it gets us very close to the miracle of life. And like, it's all good news. Even if there's something like super scary or like demonic or whatever, in the end, it's all good news. There's something larger and a bigger reality out there. I really love that quote from Hamlet. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophies, Horatio.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think the prompt for this week and the podcast later is your biggest fear, or not your biggest fear, but a fear. And I was trying to think of my biggest fear, and I think my biggest fear is that there's nothing but materialism. There's
Yeah.
nothing but like physical reality. And I don't know. It's such a sad thought that there's just chemical interactions on slime that was sitting on rocks 4 billion years ago, and then it's sort of built up. The idea that there's nothing more, that you look out in the universe and all these stars are quiet. I mean, that's a terrifying thought. And I think, and maybe these stories are something that help us not have that idea that there's something bigger and grander in what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. It's like that we're just some sort of random accident of particles,
Hmm.
that yeah, I think that's the most terrifying thought for me too.
So how did you get? I mean, how did you get into
Also
doing a?
boring. It's boring.
Yeah, exactly. How did you get into the paranormal podcast business though? What was it?
Podcast.
What made you wanted to do that show? Yeah.
Well, I had an old friend. I lived in New York for 7 years, and when I was there, at the job I was at, I was partnered with someone who was from an art and design background, and we worked very well together, and we became friends. His name is Seth Jablin, and sometimes we go out for drinks after work, and we'd talk, and inevitably we'd start talking about paranormal stuff. And, it's like you kind of feel like you belong to this secret club in a way, because, like you said, like we're kind of immersed in this culture of, not that everyone subscribes to it, but just materialism. And it's sort of a heavy weight. And you feel like you're a weirdo or some kind of outlier if you admit that you entertain some of these ideas, especially in like intellectual circles, or it's like, I don't know. So but he and I would talk, and I remember, I think one of the first conversations we ever had about something, his eyes lit up and he was telling me all about the Mothman, and I was like, this is really cool. And that just kind of never ended. And so um it was pre-COVID, it was 2019. But I had gone to visit, and we were sitting in a bar in Brooklyn. I was like, we should do a podcast. We should just talk about this stuff, and yeah, so we started one, and basically the idea was just to kind of, it gave both of us an excuse to learn more and take a deeper dive into all of these I mean, there's so much out there. There's so many stories. And so we tackle a different subject for every episode. But it also gave us kind of like a place and a space where we could kind of talk about this and not feel judged and, connect with like-minded people who have the same kind of interests.
Do you remember the first, I don't know, like story that intrigued you like that? I was trying to think of the first one for me because this show, the format of this, I try to make it kind of like the Art Bell Coast to Coast episodes.
Yes.
You
Oh my
know,
God. Oh my God. Yes.
and I love that. And so today's like the ghost to ghost open lines that he used to have, where people are sharing their ghost stories. But I love that just the mystery and the possibility of there being something more is just always fascinating. I used to work a lot of overnight shifts, so I listened to all those shows. And I'm trying to think of like what the first thing that interested me, like, there's like Bigfoot and like UFOs and,
Bermuda
things
Triangle.
like that. Yeah. Bermuda Triangle. Yeah. Which you don't hear much about. So it's interesting how they sort of come and go, and the Bermuda Triangle was a big one. That used to, and I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. Do you remember what the first sort of, non-normal thing, that caught your attention when you were however many years old?
I mean, I think when I was a little kid, I used to love to read ghost stories. And I remember, checking something out from the library and they actually, and I found it years later. It's still around. It's still out there. I could send it to you if you want. But there was like an image captured of this. Uh, it was just like a classic haunted house moment, but basically there you can see this sort of misty figure descending the stairs, and this was an alleged ghost photograph, and I was just like, oh my God. And plus the place I grew up, it was very rural, so it was near the woods, and so fall was like it was intense. With all of the leaves, and you could just really feel the whole like weight of the season. And I feel like that was a big influence too. But yeah, I think it would probably be ghost stories. And then I really got interested in the Bermuda Triangle and Bigfoot and then UFOs, and it just kind of never stopped except for a brief period in college when I became an atheist for a while. And I'm like, I was raised in a very religious environment. So I had to like rebel. I had to like shut all that down. I had to push it all away and be like, yeah, there's nothing. I'm just a materialist, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't a very good one because like pretty soon I started like reading about astral projection and it all started up again.
Well, it's interesting looking at the chat window, which you can't see, but people are listing things. It's like a walk through my childhood. There's the Hardy Boys and Scooby Doo.
Oh my God, the
Danigan.
Yes, Nancy Drew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was like Unsolved Mysteries, that show on TV.
Oh, I love Unsolved
and the
Mysteries.
X-Files.
And the new one is great too.
I haven't seen the new one, but did you ever have any experience personally where you experienced something that you didn't think was something that would be accepted by the mainstream view of the world, let's say?
Yes, and I think the fact that I was raised in a very kind of, I guess, strict religious household, Christian. My mom was she was very passionate, some might say fanatical in a lot of ways, but in a way I look at it now as sort of her art form that she practiced. She was a very intelligent and empathetic and deep person and had her own experiences that she brought to it. But that being said, that's a lot. That's a lot for a kid to be raised around. And I think there were aspects of it that felt burdensome and like it was hemming me in and that I needed to rebel against. But I think I always just naturally had this fascination with it too, with the supernatural aspect, mm-hmm. and like wanting to believe and wanting to have an experience. And there have been experiences that I've had over the course of my life that are personal to me that I think for the most part, it has been, I've had this, something that felt a little more like a spiritual, religious experience a couple times. but I've also kind of had a sort of a, I guess you call it like a psychic or ESP or some kind of, something connected to my dreams. I've had dreams that have come true, and it's happened over and over throughout the years. Where, like, for example, a good friend of mine, I dreamed that she told me she was pregnant. A few days later, I was visiting her and she came out of the bathroom and told me she was pregnant. Things like that. But it happened ever since I was probably like a teen, a young teen. But it's nothing I can predict. It's something that just like it's very random. And I've had, both my parents have passed away, and I have had what I personally believe could be 2 visitation dreams, which is when it's a dream that feels like it's different from other dreams that you may have about a departed loved one. It's where it feels, there are hallmarks about it, where there's a sense that you're having a real conversation. Their mood, they're very happy. It feels very real. It feels like you're kind of removed from the current reality. It's not just like a dream where your brain's working out some kind of, some issue and bringing in random visuals and stuff. It's like, it feels like a conversation. I've had 2 of those. But I think it's been fascinating for me to dive into other people's stories and what they've experienced. What about you?
Well, I've had, I'm going to tell the ghost story. I have a ghost story.
Oh
I
my
also
God.
had, I'll tell it in the open lines because that's what the poem is about that I wrote this week. But I've had that, and I've had, there was a time where I really wondered about aliens because I sleepwalked. I shared this before one time. I had a poem about that in the open lines too once, but I sleepwalked when I was a kid, like when I was like 12 or 13. And sometimes I'd literally wake up outside. Like I'd sleepwalk outside, like in my pajamas or underwear or whatever, like by the mailbox down by the road with my like dad shaking me to be like, wake up, you're sleepwalking again. And I'd be like, oh, and then I just thought that was weird. And then I saw probably on, the Unsolved Mysteries or the X-Files or something. And I was like, aliens, I've been abducted by aliens. And so I got little like goosebumps that thought of like, maybe the aliens pick me up in bed and plop me up in my, in the mailbox in front of the house. So I don't know, there's been that. And definitely the psychic type stuff, like like Katie and I will be talking about stuff and then it'll appear in someone else's poem on the open lines like that week. Like somehow, I don't know what, like we knew someone was writing a poem about that. And so it got in our brain, or like our brain projected out into that brain. I always try to think of like a unifying, if there is like a strangeness, like a higher strangeness than the sort of the science that the scientific method can piece together, like what would be the unifying thing behind it? And it seems to me that consciousness is the central aspect of it. Like there's a way that either we like see things beyond what we see or we project out, which might even be more likely that like somehow our collective imagination is what's like generating reality. And so it's really fascinating to me how, for example, the, for hundreds and hundreds of years, there have been sort of like UFO type sightings, but at the time it was like religious figures, like the sun coming down to earth and things like that. But now that we have this like technological society where there'd be like UFOs and spaceships or something we think about, all of a sudden we see spaceships, and there's this way that like we project reality out onto the world. And maybe that's the thing, like the ghosts are like your imagination making a ghost manifest like out of your mind because we're all like holograms living on the surface of a 4-dimensional black hole or something like that. I don't know. So
that's interesting, like a tulpa, where you kind of like make something materialize. Like,
yeah, like what if we're all doing that? And what if like, like not, you don't like see the future, but you like make the future happen because it's all some kind of like movie that we're actively projecting in a collective, but occasionally we get enough control of the script where a reality, pops out. And maybe that's it. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Well, actually, I really I love the philosophy that some people have, and her name escapes me at the moment. There was, and I can send it to you later, but there's a book out by a Harvard neurologist that basically was like a survey of different kind of like psychic phenomena and ESP, and her conclusion, and other people have come up with the same one, and that really resonates with me, is that the brain is not like materialism says, a generator of consciousness. It's not just like this glob in your head that just creates the thoughts, and then just like a machine, when you die, it dies, the end. It's a filter of consciousness, and we're here in this dimension living our lives, and for whatever reason we're kind of chained down to the physical realm. But there are moments where you can kind of, the filter can be thinned a little bit. So it can be meditation, it can be the dream state, or if people astral project, or if they have some kind of drug trip, or even people who are like having some kind of psychotic break or whatever else. Not to say that there isn't mental illness in there. I'm not saying that at all, but just that in different states, and near death, which is like one of my favorite episodes for Shadowland that we ever did. We talked to someone who studies that stuff, but near death experiences, when people are near death, a lot of times they see things. So it's like, then the filter's thinner and it lets things through. So there's a larger reality out there, which we don't have access to most of the time here, but sometimes we do. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think that is the explanation. I mean, there's two, of course. There's the rational one, that we have a lot of cognitive biases, a lot of holes. Like there's this spot that I can't see because my, the neuron connected to my eyeball is right there, but I fill in the gap anyway. There's that confirmation bias. I mean, maybe we have 1,000 things that could possibly be generated, and all of a sudden we see, oh, that's the one that, I had the dream last night, but the million times it doesn't happen. So that's one explanation. And the other is that there's this grand reality that's a little bigger than our reality, or infinitely bigger than our reality. And we just are seeing a sliver of what's actually here. And I mean, to be honest, I go back and forth. And I think one of the fascinating things about poetry is that it's a way that consciousness, whatever it is, that strangeness, talks to each other. Like there's a way that it's like this, almost like a seance. Like there's that whole thing about like being inhabited. I don't know if you've ever done any episodes on that, but being inhabited like a medium. Like we say that we feel like a medium as we're writing. Like a lot of poets will say, like, it feels like someone else is writing this. And it's a way to tap into whatever is deeper, be that the subconscious or the higher realm of the collective consciousness. There's something there. And when a poem is great, it connects on that level across people. And I think that's why, because there's some kind of collectiveness that's going on. So I do think it ties right back into poetry.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you just said it. That's great.
So you mentioned the near-death experience episode. That being your favorite. Tell us about that one.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah, it's very close to my heart. So we had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Jeffrey Long, who has studied near-death experiences for many years. And basically, he has a website that has amassed, an enormous amount. I think it's in the thousands now of near-death experiences from all over the world. And they were reading the site. I had come across his book earlier, I want to say, because he's written a couple books too. About this experience, but he started out, he's a trained physician. He's got a very scientific mind, and he heard I think it was like the wife of a friend of his shared a near-death experience with him, and he became very interested in the subject. And he was a radiation oncologist, and so he was hearing from patients who were near death different stories, and he just really took a deep dive into this stuff, and then wrote about it later, but also has this place where you can go through and you can read all of them, and there are thousands, and I've read through many of them. When my mom passed away, it was just, I had never I lost my grandmother, I had lost more distant relatives. I'd never gone through death like that. It had never gotten that close to me, and it was just, I was so close to her, and loved her so much, and it was just heart-wrenching. And it was very comforting for me to read through these experiences, and not just because of wishful thinking, because one of the things that I noticed is that you think of near-death experience, you think of, oh, the tunnel and the light at the end, and you see the relatives and they come to get you, and there are all of these tropes and cliches. There were little things that I kept seeing. And from people's stories, it doesn't matter where they live or what their cultural or religious background is, but there are these little small specifics and similarities. And that's what kind of started to convince me. And I asked him when we had him on the show to share some of his, the favorite stories. And also I asked him, is there any part of you that doubts any of this? And he was basically like, no.
Wow.
I can't say that yet because I still struggle, with what I think, just as like what you said you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely go back and forth. I think some days it's sort of fun to believe in stuff, and sometimes it's frightening to believe in stuff, and sometimes it's frightening not to believe in stuff. And I think that maybe clouds your opinion too much. But it is just it's fun to think about it, just think about things that are outside. And maybe that's another way that it relates to poetry, because you have a voice or a concept that's like external to your actual reality. You're generating this whole like separate world when you're making a poem. And so, and it's a separate world. It's like possible and could be true and maybe not. And you start to have to suspend this disbelief in order to get there. And then when you do, it's interesting, and the implications of that are interesting. I think the near-death experience is a great segue. You had some favorite poems from the Romantic era that you wanted to share and read. And either The Apparition by John Donne or Annabel Lee would be a good one to read right now, given the topic.
Man.
Poe, of course, all those people in his life died. And most of his writing was about how to deal with that and imagining a different life and a way to be reunited again. And maybe Poe, do you want to read Annabel Lee?
Yeah, I'd love to. I never get tired of it. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden, she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Yeah, that was Annabel Lee, of course, by Edgar Allan Poe. One of the first poets you loved, one of the first poets I loved. A creepy poem in multiple respects. So I think he's writing about his very young wife, too. But a metaphor for all of the loss. And it made me think, as you were reading it, about that comparison between romanticness and the supernatural. There's a way that the was is so prevalent in that poem. Like the love was there, but it's no longer there. And there's a way too with the paranormal that you get that sense of a higher thing going on in the world, and then it's gone. Like if you're somebody who sees a UFO once, we did have a UFO here, which I think was just a drone. But one night I was watching TV out the window, and there was this light that was like going through the trees. And I was like, what is that? Because we do live near a military base. And so I think maybe it was like a drone, maybe it was doing something. But there was this light and it was like strange and it was kind of covering through and you could see some of the trees like blocking it. Like it was that low. And I went out to the porch to like get a better look. And as soon as I opened the door and looked out, it like shot straight up. And it was strange. And if you go to the
quickly.
right, what's that?
Oh, quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, it like within like 5 seconds, it was so far away that I couldn't see it anymore. So, and then on
that sounds like a drone, man.
It does sound like a drone. This was like,
no, I said I don't know if it sounds like a drone.
I don't know. Well, I live right next to Edwards Air Force Base, and we are in the flight corridor, and okay. I don't know. But going on to our like online forum, this was like 12 years ago, maybe. There's a whole bunch of posts, like tons of people saw it. But then you see something, you're like, what was that? And then it's gone, you know? And there's that way that like, oh, that's something special that I don't see every day. That sense of breaking the strangeness or the sameness, I mean. And then it's gone and you like kind of want to get it back. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons people get into that paranormal feeling is like, oh, I saw something that was different and now it's gone. And I need to find that feeling again of something different, you know, and it's outside of the monotony.
Yeah, a lot of people that are researchers end up getting into it because they've had some kind of experience that they've like been close to something and it's been life-changing for them.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about it in that respect. Do you want to, let's see, if there are any questions for Christina, I'll pass them along, leave them in the chat when it was on Facebook or YouTube. I'll keep an eye on them. But we did have a question already from, let me see. Where did it go? It was Michelle Dobos. I can't find exactly how she said it, but she was asking about whether or not you write, since you have this interest in the paranormal, how often do you write paranormal poems? I know you wrote 2 recently that we're going to be looking at really quick as we wrap it up, but how often do you do that? Is it something that you're drawn to or not?
You know, it's kind of strange. Not that much. I don't know if it's because I get my paranormal fix from doing the podcast, or, you know, I've written, I guess I take that back. I've written about, I guess what I would call it more of like the supernatural. I've written poems that are kind of based on experiences I had and growing up and being raised and, you know, sort of in proximity to this, the faith that I was raised around. So yeah, it's a good question. But not specifically, like I actually, last year I went back to Marquette where I was born and for a visit, and I met one of the famous poets up there who writes a lot about Bigfoot. So he's like the Bigfoot poet. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that I've got anything like that. I wish.
Well, I do.
But I am working on one on Mel's Hole.
Yeah, I love Mel's Hole too. And there is, as you know, doing a paranormal podcast, there's a lot of more audience for paranormal stuff than there is for poetry. I mean, frankly, like if you go to a bookstore, the poetry shelf is like, you know, that big, and it's mostly like Dante and things like that. And then, but the paranormal type stuff, any kind of, you know, strange things, ghost stories, it's a whole section, you know, and there's, you know, that we mentioned the Art Bell show, but that had, I don't know, 10 million people listening every night or something insane like that. So do you ever think about, you know, capitalizing on that? Because you have the one and the other, and why not put them together?
You know, I do have a few different ones that I started, like I mentioned, the Mel's Hole, and another one where when I was a teenager, I kind of imagined I saw Keats' ghost in my doorway. Like I have all these different poems started. So I guess there are some, you know, a handful to maybe 10 that I've done. But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So tell us about the Mel's Hole, because I think I do know what you're talking about, because it's from Art Bell.
It is from Art Bell. Yeah. Did you ever hear that episode?
I did. I definitely did. I don't think I heard it like live the time. As I remember, though, somebody just called in and started describing this hole. So why don't you tell the story?
Yeah, so basically, and this is one that we covered on Shadowlands kind of earlier on, and it's one of my favorites to this day. Basically, the gist of it is that this guy named Mel Waters called into Art Bell's radio show in 1997, and he started telling this incredibly crazy tale of a hole that he discovered on his property. And the story just was, it instantly grabbed me. I mean, it's like, it reminds me of something out of like the perfect 80s movie or something. Um, and basically, it's this very deep hole. Nobody in the neighborhood or surrounding area. I got the feeling he lived in more of a rural area, kind of like a ranch type of place where his neighbors weren't super close by. But people would come in and they would dump their garbage into it because it was so deep. And even stuff like dead dogs or dead cattle, they'd throw things in there. And then there was like this lore around the thing, like somebody's dog maybe came back from the dead later after he'd thrown it in there. But Mel goes on to describe how a friend of his had given him some fishing line, and it was on these huge reels, so there was a lot of it. And so he tied some lifesavers to the end of it, which I guess is an old trick to test if there's water on the end. So if like the lifesavers start to melt or something, you've reached water. And he lowered it down, and then he would bring it back up, and lifesavers are intact, no water. And so he kept lowering and lowering and lowering and lowering. And he got, at the time of this phone call, he said 15 miles down into this hole, and there's no sign of a bottom yet. And so, and this was just like the first of several calls that this guy made. And they kept getting stranger and stranger and stranger. And I won't ruin it for everybody. But for a while, there was missing time. A nearby neighbor said that they saw like a huge, enormous column, like a night spotlight shooting up out of the hole, but it was like solid black. When he was driving by. The government apparently came and like when Mel was away and like sealed off and wouldn't allow him back onto his property, and then paid him all kinds of money, and he left the country for a while. And it's this big meandering story. And then a second bottomless pit was discovered by Mel later on in one of the later calls. And he basically pulled some strange stuff out of there, including something from the underworld that was what he described as a tumor seal, but it had these almost like a deity or something. It conveyed the sense of like infinite compassion and love and just radiate. It's freaking bizarre. You've got to hear it for yourself. I don't want to ruin it anymore, but
it's so
people
fun.
have like been searching for it. No one's been able to find it, and apparently it was mysteriously, suspiciously blacked out on Google Earth. So if you tried to find it, you couldn't find where Mel's hole was.
Yeah, and I think it was in Oregon somewhere, and or is in theory. And like my kids, we watch Gravity Falls. I don't know if you've seen that show. It's on the Disney Channel. It's amazingly hilarious. It's like the funniest clean humor that's kid appropriate I've ever come in contact. It's a hilarious show. They have an episode based on Mel's hole too, although they don't call it that. Yeah. But what's amazing or interesting about it is it really shows what we were talking about before with the storytelling, and how like you could have somebody call into the Art Bell show or wherever and there's a hole and it's deep, and but it was the way that he slowly unveiled it and sort of upped the ante and kept going, and the pacing was just perfect on his just storytelling, whoever it was, whether or not it was true or if it was just somebody trolling and enjoying it, but they were a great storyteller.
At this point. I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and we can learn a lot, I think, in our poetry, our narrative poetry, from this kind of storytelling, because there's a way that something like The Raven or something like Mel's Hole story keeps us engaged and keeps us entertained for as long as, the storyteller is telling their story. So it's fascinating. I love that Mel's Hole story too. So wait, I want to do the two poems that you sent too. You have two poems that are new and based on supernatural stuff. Do you want to read one of those?
Sure. Okay, so I guess I could start off with I wrote a sonnet, and it was kind of inspired in a way from the John Donne one that I didn't read, The Apparition. But basically, it's sort of it's a little bit petty. It's sort of like, in the voice of someone who's been spurned. Not that I ever have experienced that personally. Kidding. But it's called How I Would Haunt You. Not only in the ways you would expect, with flickering lights and obscure Smith song to halt your cart from a Costco intercom. I'd haunt you hard, send 3 a.m. texts. I'd pick the oddest times to show my face, the DMV just as your number's called, the last sog Cheerios circling your bowl, a billboard on the M10 overpass. And forget the nightgown, long and white. I'd go sexy into that good night, slut it up just so you'd know exactly what it is you're missing in the afterlife. And when you're drowning in some fevered dream, I'd wake you with a kiss that might have been.
Yeah, it was great. Great song. How I Would Haunt You by Christina Kallery, a new one. So what do you think about the fact that that these kind of stories are put off in a genre category? You know, like I always think about this. I've mentioned it before on the Rattlecast, but I had a professor, what was her name? Sarah Higley, which I can reveal but for the longest time she was keeping it a secret. She had a whole separate life. She was a medieval studies scholar by day, and then wrote for Star Trek, The Next Generation, and had a whole nother name with like an alter ego that wrote about like aliens and alien sex and things like that. And she had them completely separate, like they were two things that were totally incompatible, like a serious scholar versus the supernatural aliens and stuff. Why do you think that we shut those two things and separate them apart so much? Like if you shared a poem like one of these two to a literary magazine, they would say, well, you know, this belongs in Strange Horizons maybe and not a literary magazine. So why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I think the poetry world can be a little bit snobbish and pretentious and take itself very seriously and not lighten up a bit. I mean, I could stand to lighten up a little more. Yeah, that's an excellent question. But I mean, I do think though that it does come out of that whole materialist mindset, you know, that's accepted, you know, the scientific method, and, you know, this is all there is, and this is what we can prove. And so, you know, all of this other stuff, you're stupid, or you're superstitious, or you're misguided, or, you know, whatever you want to put on it, if you kind of delve into that realm at all, you know. Serious people don't do that. It was conformist, I guess.
Yeah, I think we ditch religion, then make a religion out of science. And there's this scientism religion that just dominates and crushes all mystery, because there can't be mystery in the material world. Yeah. Well, we're sort of up on time, but let's wrap it up with the other poem that you have. And this was based on our prompt. So it was Museum of Ghosts, fresh, hot off the press. Do you want to introduce this at all, or just share it?
Yeah, I mean, I was inspired by this prompt. It was to write about a museum. You shared one of yours, and I just thought this... one of the things that we've done in an early episode on Shadowland, and one of the things that interests me when you talk about ghosts, is that there are these different categories of ghosts. You know, there are ones where it's almost like an imprint that just keeps playing over and over and over again. And you know, there are discussions that this is just something, it's kind of like a photograph or an imprint in time, you know, that this isn't actually an entity, nothing personal about it. And, you know, so there are these different tropes when you talk about ghosts. And I was thinking about that. You know, there are the ghosts that are there because they want to convey a message. And a lot of times, what really interests me are these little details that come out, like I was talking about with the near-death experience episode. One of the things you hear over and over again is things appearing in corners and in kind of this like liminal space. And we talked about this on the podcast before, but the witching hour is 3 a.m. and it's the in-between space. It's between nighttime and morning. When someone's on their deathbed and they see something and they're looking up at the corner of the room and they see someone. I mean, you hear these stories over and over and over again, to the point where it feels like, and these are coming from like hospice nurses and family members and things like that. Like there's something going on here. What is it? And even just like this notion of autumn and October, it's this in-between kind of liminal space point. So anyway, long-winded way to introduce this poem. It's called The Museum of Ghosts. What there is to see here hangs primarily in corners, caught like the parchment moth awaiting her fate. Their misty silhouettes skim along the edges of your sight, disperse the instant that you turn. In the hall of shadows, cloaked and faceless figures peer from marble pillars or the archway of a door. You'll hear familiar voices calling from a distant wing. Never follow, but feel their whisper shivering your ear. As we ascend the winding stair, stay keen for fingers snatching at your ankles from the dark between the slats. And here in the dust-swirled attic, sweet with wood rot, windless as a tomb, they hover over deathbeds in the corners of the room. Only fading eyes could see them stir. But look, the windows crimp tight as a coffin lid, and still the curtains sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's the Museum of Ghosts, and a great way to transition us into the spooky open lines. Christina, thanks so much for being a guest, and hopefully, I could see, all your episodes. If each of your episodes was a poem, you'd have a whole book of poems about your Shadowland podcast. You could call it Shadowland, and then that would be perfect branding. Yeah. So tell us about Shadowland, though. Where people can find it, how often do you do it, and what do you have up next with it?
Well, we just released a new episode, and it's on black-eyed entities. You've heard of the black-eyed kids. This is expands it a bit into some other things that people have seen, which I think are pretty terrifying and Halloween appropriate. But we're doing it now monthly, maybe a little less. When we started out, we kind of had more time, and especially when the pandemic hit and we were cooped up in the house, we were doing it, like twice a month. But yeah, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, anything, Audible, Amazon, all of it. So yeah. And also, if anybody has any paranormal stories, we're going to be putting together a campfire listeners episode. We're going to be reading spooky stories that people have submitted. So we'd love to get some more submissions. And it's shadowlandpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram, and you can DM us there if that's easier, or Facebook, or however you want to hit me up. That would be great. Would love some new spooky stories, and yours too. I want to hear yours, Tim.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Yeah, it's a great podcast. I listened to a bunch of the episodes. It's really fun stuff, and really well done. So I do encourage everybody to check it out and contribute to the open lines type segment you have as the campfire stories get rolled out. Yeah, thanks for being a guest, Christina. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. Love your work, and really love the podcast too. Yep, take care. That was Christina Kallery, once again, and she's author of Adult Night at Skate World and co-host of the Shadowland Paranormal Podcast. You can find more at ChristinaKallery.com. It's spelled just like it sounds. Christina, Christina, Kallery with a K, Kallery.com. And that is where you can find all of her stuff. So do check it out. Now, I forgot to say at some point in the show, but do click the like button if you haven't yet. The show's not over yet. And if you could like it, that would be much appreciated. The more likes we get, the more it's spread around through the algorithms of the various platforms that hear this. There's about 1/5 of the people who have clicked, who are watching right now have clicked the like button. So don't forget to do that. Now we're going to go to open lines. And it's our spooky Halloween open lines. And how it's going to work is this. We have the prompt, of course, but you can also share anything spooky that you would like. So here we go. This is how it is going to work. So the prompt was to write a poem about a fear, but you can also share anything that's scary. And if you'd like to do that, all you have to do is join on the Zoom link. I'm going to put the Zoom link in the chat windows on Facebook and YouTube. There is one deployed. Here is the other deployed. There we go. And if you'd like to join us on the Zoom and email the poem to openmic, that's openmic @rattle.com. And then email the poem there so I can share it and read it and show it on the screen as you read. If you don't have anything to share, though, the stream continues. This is just if you want to share a poem. So otherwise, keep watching, and we'll be back in just a moment with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Let's start out by talking to our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier. Hey, Katie.
Hello.
How you doing?
I should have said boo. It was my opportunity to say boo.
You should have. We missed our chance.
Oh, man.
So the prompt this week was to write about a fear. We wanted to do something that was sort of theme-ish, but didn't take over Halloween because with a prompt poem series, if we published a poem that was based on Halloween in November, it would seem like late. And so we wanted something that would still be appropriate in November, but would work today. And you picked a poem about a fear. So what did you come up with?
Well, first I wrote about 8. Apparently I have a lot of fears to go on. This was a prompt that inspired a lot. But my fear, as I get into, is just about time. There's never enough, time. And so I'll get into, maybe I should have said that after I read the poem, but oh well, you guys will forgive me.
Okay. Well,
my fear is spoiling the poem.
That would be definitely a poet's fear, one of those poet's nightmares.
Yeah. So this is called That Time I Washed My Watch. I'm terrified to consider all the time I've sullied by consorting with socks. My mismatched thoughts are strewn behind the dryer, which never finishes until I forget to check. I've grown so accustomed to its buzz that now I'm just the fuzz, a spark in the lint trap. Did you know that we would see the sun for 8 whole minutes before it all went dark? I bet you did. When I think of how I'd spend that chunk of cheddar, I imagine hugging every person so hard that I break their ribs. They don't mind, so we break the rest of them by laughing. The point is, dramatic irony. The point is, my love sticks to your ribs. The point is, I don't have time to comprehend that at any given moment, the world may have already ended. I've never owned a watch and don't intend to start winding down, but I know this. The best time can do is jump inside its own hat, and you can watch that. Once I stared into my baby's eyes as her irises threaded new veins, blue rivers. The world willed itself to wait, and it will again, while you turn into a white bed with your lover, precipitate the clouds, and fuck the laundry. May what wants to rain be all that rains. And by the way, that won't wash out.
Yeah, excellent poem. I love the way the playfulness combines with the fear, and that the chunk of cheddar is a great line in particular. And it works too as a great transition between the Poetry Space episodes. So we had the Poe episode last week on the Poetry Space, which is on Thursdays over on X. I'm just going to say X, whatever. But
we need to accept it's X at this
point,
point, and it's actually X.
Yeah, we definitely do. So over on X, we do the Poetry Space. We did Poe, and then next week is Playfulness, which is going to be a lot of fun. And this combines the two. I don't know if that was an accident, but it worked really well in that regard. Coming off the Poe episode, do you have any sort of general thoughts about Poe? Like, did you learn something you didn't know about Poe in the process of going through for a week?
I think that I focused way in on his musicality in a way that I hadn't before. And I also think I've been too shy using alliteration in my own poetry. Like, he just owned it. He could have 4 words that started with the same sound right by each other. And it kind of emboldened me. And I actually did, I tried to write a bunch of haiku in his voice also, which was fun.
Well, Poe is really interesting. And I didn't know, I hadn't explored his background very much. I knew some of his poems, but not a whole lot about him. He was a really interesting person. So check out that Poetry Space if you haven't missed it. It's also available everywhere your podcasts are. It's like an hour chatting about poetry. And I think you have more poetry coming up in a little bit, Katie, so we'll come back to you for that. I think I'll share my prompt poem now. And I meant to do I meant to show a picture of this house. And now I can't because I'm logged in as Rattle on Facebook streaming. So I think I can't actually show it because I posted on Facebook, which is the only place I have a picture of this house. But this the ghost story. So I struggled with writing this ghost story. Because I'm like I said, I'm not really a narrative poet, and I think it works better just telling it as a ghost story. So I was really struggling today trying to get this into a way that would work. I was trying to do another alliterative verse poem because I liked that last week. I felt like that would be a good storytelling way to make it sort of epically legendary, and it just wasn't working for me in the right way. So I think, but I have the poem here. I think I'll tell you the ghost story because it was and then that'll be your introduction to the poem, which is a variation on that. But so anyway, the story is this. So when I was 5 and 6 years old, my parents were separated. I lived in this old house on Henrietta Street in Rochester, New York. It was built in like 1880 or so. And it was like rotting, really. Like everything was like falling apart. The roofs were sagging. We had to replace a bunch of the beams before we could even live in. It wasn't habitable. Habitable? Is that a word? Habitable? when we moved in, and I think my dad bought it for like $12,000 or something. That's how bad it was, and it had no central heating either. And so it was just this creaky old house. These really tall, weird Victorian type windows. And there was no heat except for this potbelly stove. So in the winter, I would sleep on the couch to stay warm. And my dad was in like the room right next to the living room. It was like a front room because that was the only two houses the only rooms in the house we could keep warm. And we also had, since the windows were like single pane and so drafty, we had these storm shutters that were always closed and locked. And then we had this like plastic we put over the window to keep the drafts out because it was a really drafty house too. And so all night he'd tend the potbelly stove, like come in occasionally when it went out, and we'd keep the house warm that way, but it was still cold. And so I was sleeping on the couch one night, and I had this dream that I woke up from. And I just shouted, "They're coming in through the windows! They're coming in through the windows!" And we had it was a bad neighborhood too. And so we had people that would like break into the house all the time. And so my dad was like used to like worrying about that, and he'd come running with a shotgun. So he comes running with his shotgun, like, "Oh, someone's breaking into the house." And there was nobody there. And he pulls back the curtains, is like, "See, you're just having a nightmare. There's nobody there. Don't worry about it." And then in between the plastic sheet that's over the window and the storm shutters that are locked shut, the window in the middle was open. Yeah, it really was. And that is a really creepy thing. And it's a true story. Creeped my dad completely out. Like we had to cut off the plastic to close it. And it definitely wasn't closed all winter. It was definitely closed before in the winter. Like at some point, since we looked out the window last, it had gone from being closed to being open. And that was really creepy. So that is my ghost story and a true story in that old creepy house on Henrietta Street. And I wish I could show you the picture because the picture from Google Street View looks really creepy too still, even in 2010 or whenever they took it. But anyway, this is my alliterative verse poem based on that ghost story because there's a lot more to it too. A lot had to do with my dad's PTSD and things like that as well. So maybe that comes up in the poem, but here we go. This is Henrietta Street. Let's take a look. Here you go, Henrietta Street. The house was 100 years old, held up by rotting beams and buckling floorboards. The ceiling sagged with the soft weight of even a child. Every evening, lying on the couch, a little lump of boy in blanket, trying to be warm, that was me. My father making fire, pitching logs into a potbelly stove. And it was warm for a short while, in the way that sleep was worn for a while, until a tiny sound tears a hole in its cloth. Eyes closed, consciousness returns to the soul it was tied to. That's when I awoke, the loosely woven sheet of my sleep still a shroud. I couldn't see, but someone was shouting, "The windows! Coming in through the windows!" That house was peeling paint and pounding footfalls overhead. My father running with a shotgun, someone screaming, "Me!" But no one was there. No, nothing but air. That is the story. And see how the story didn't all get into the poem. And I just couldn't, I wrote it like twice as long, and I was boring myself. And so I cut it down to where it wanted to go and let the poem be itself. So that's it. But that's the whole story. So that is my ghost story. Let's see. Do you want to do, Katie, to more transition, do you want to do your Poku? Because I think that would be fun too.
I would love to. Can I call them Poku? I really want to, but I just keep calling everything Ku. And I know I've worn out that idea, but I just want to keep going with everything's a Ku.
That's what the haiku people do. Everything is a Ku. There's Sciku, there's sci-fi Ku, there's all sorts of Ku. So yeah, it could be.
What about a cuckoo? A cuckoo could be like a really nonsensical haiku, maybe.
I think you just invented a genre.
All right. So what I did with this was I actually used, controversially, ChatGPT to try to parse out the words that Poe uses most that aren't like common words. And I looked at that list as a way to inspire me because naturally I don't go towards melodramatic words. I trained myself not to. So I used that as kind of a way. And the first one is a poker type one. So I'm excited about that. Okay. So I don't know. I named this haiku sequence too, so forgive me. If Poe wrote haiku. Gambling, my telltale heart on queens. Midnight moon, the plutonium mass of my heart. Another vine creeps up this iron gate. I love her. Blown out candles, her eyes flash red. Coughing under countless crows, I cry murder. A smokestack rises in the fog. Dream within a dream.
Yeah, excellent. Some great poku there. Thanks for sharing those, Katie. Great way to transition into the open lines. And so anything you have to share. So usually we say anything that you want to share, feel free to share. But this is for open lines for scary type poems or poems based on a fear. And moving forward, I should say just a little program note. We're going to be focusing on the prompts from now on. And so the prompt open lines will become the prompt lines, starting with the next episode, because we've had such great prompt poems coming up, and I just like the cohesion that having that does. So for tonight, it's the fear-based prompt poems or anything scary and Halloween-ish. In the future, it will usually just be, unless we have some other category like that we want to do, just the prompt poems. So anyway, let's see what you have tonight. Let's jump right into it with Dick Westheimer, who is first in line. Hey, Dick.
Well, I was about to bail because I have neither of those. I have a Poets Respond poem. So why don't you move on to a poet that is more with the tenor of the evening?
All right. Well, we're going to be going for like another hour. So if you have, write another poem really quick.
Okay. Okay. If I do, I will jump back on.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dick.
Sure. Bye.
Yeah, that was Dick Westheimer. And of course, if we'll see how it goes doing it this way. But if you have, so if you don't have anything creepy, just hop off the Zoom and watch the creepy stuff. But let's see, we have a lot of people in line. I think it's going to be a great open lines. Let's go to Nancy Sobanik. Is it Sobanik or Sobanik, Nancy? I never know. Oh, you're muted still. Sorry.
Oh, am I unmuted?
There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to read a creepy one. Creepy silly. It's called Phantasm.
Excellent.
A chill has wrapped the night in velvet stoles and crept along the bare and frigid floor. The dripping faucet plinks into a bowl, a metronome whose sound I do deplore. Weird phantoms snap a towel inside my head, and terror shakes my waking dream ajar. Where once I lay and slumbered, now instead, the fragments of my thoughts an abattoir. When down the hall I think I hear a sound, a shuffling step, a tapping in dry wall. Chimera of two minds has come unbound. That which I think is real keeps me in thrall. Then suddenly a light slips past the house, backlights the ghost, a silhouetted mouse.
Oh, excellent. I always love a sonnet, and that is a especially good sonnet for the open line tonight. Thanks for kicking it out with a good one, Nancy.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was Nancy Sobanik with Phantoms. And let's so let's see, Aiden and who else was before? And Odd Writings mentioned that they have fear poems that aren't creepy. That's fine. Anything prompt-based is great for the prompt lines. Let's go to Zachary Honeycutt, who has been chomping at the bit for this episode for many a moon. Well, no pun intended even. That's literally true. Zachary, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great. How you guys doing? How you doing, Tim?
Great. It's great to see you for the Spooky Open Lines. I think you did a poem last year too, and of course we've had a bunch in the interim that would apply. What have you got for us?
Well, I actually have a very creepy high bin that I made out of one of my favorite ghost stories that I've ever written. It's probably the creepiest thing that I've ever read on the show, and I'm really looking forward to performing it tonight for you guys.
Well, I'm a little scared if there's if it's the creepiest thing, because you have read some creepy things. Let's hear it. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
The Locker. What is insanity? It is not a tangible thing. It is used to describe something or some quality that is irregular. It is a characteristic that stands out among those of the natural world. It exists outside the realm of the norm of reality, but is observed by those that are bound to reality. What is insanity? It is merely a label created by that observer bound to reality that is used to explain a phenomenon that is different or misunderstood or unknown. At this desperate time in my life, I, Arthur Benjamin Ridley, have many questions on the subject, but the one that takes precedence over all the others in my mind is, does a lunatic know he is insane? I know how to prove I'm not mad, realizing what the ultimate test of my sanity was some time ago. I have to do it. I just have to, I keep telling myself. I have to open the locker. What am I talking about, you may ask yourself? What fantasy am I referring to? Is this object, this thing, this locker, a figment of my imagination? Is it something I create to fixate my madness upon? What is this locker? It is the reason why I think the way I do, enveloping myself with these reflections that barter logic and reason for paranoia. The locker is the source of my madness, and if I can only open it to see what's inside, I can prove my sanity to you, hopefully. For I know something very strange and bizarre, some dark and sinister force, some hidden evil exists within the confines of that locker, waiting to reveal itself to me. Perhaps some demonic creature lurks in the shadows of that locker, possessing my mind and the minds of the other students, my fellow classmates. You see, if I am insane, well, I am not alone. Other students notice the locker too, and even inquire about it. They ask me, fearfully passing in front of its metal gaze, why strange things happen around the locker. Misunderstood things, things that go against the laws of reality, insane things. You're wondering what these things are. I'll tell you, though it will add to the weight of my madness and yours. I am not positive how the locker decides to haunt the minds of the other students, but I can tell you how it haunts mine. Every day, before and after lunch, I have to pass that evil force, and whenever I do, I hear voices. I'll say it again. I hear voices so distinct and clear. It is like the people uttering the words of these voices are right there beside me. Do you know what they say? They keep repeating the horrible thing I have to do, warning me not to do it. Every time I pass the locker, they say, "Don't open it." This I know makes sense, but I'm not going to listen to their reason. I haven't told you about the worst characteristics of the locker and perhaps my insanity. No, I've been holding back with good reason. For I observe all the other students and how they face this problem. The locker, the evil of it, the curiosity of what that evil is, inspires many others to do what I'm about to do. Every now and then, my companions and I will hear of some brave soul or lunatic soul that plans to look inside the locker. But when that soul does, oh, that soul never returns. It's so horrible. Every person that decides to look inside that locker will vanish. It's as though he was never there at all and had never searched the locker. But I know better. In all my insanity, I tell you, every time a student disappears, I hear a new voice, being the voice of that very student, the person that is missing. So at last, the time has come. Now that you have heard my insanity and can make your own opinion of it, I progress onwards. Slowly and cautiously, I approach the evil thing, that horrible spirit of doom and gloom that is the locker. I feel sweat drip down my brow, moistening the texture of my skin. I feel the thump of my heart in my chest. the sound probably becoming audible to any passerby. I feel as though I can see within the locker. What I see are two bright red, menacing eyes watching me as I approach them. Finally, I reach the locker, which revels in my displeasure, and emits a myriad of voices, adding to my horror. Ignoring them, I focus on the metal lock, which is unlocked. It's always unlocked. I stare at the ugly thing. It is full of dents, its metal skin severely bruised. I take a long, deep breath. It's now or never, I say as I pull it open. I gasped. Inside the locker are the cut-up body parts of the students that have disappeared. There are arms, legs, hands, feet, eyeballs, all in pieces, piled up along the metal walls. You think I will scream, but I don't. I laugh. I sigh with relief, my spirit rejuvenated. I am happy, not because of the dismembered classmates, but because I faced my fears, and furthermore, because I, Arthur Benjamin Ridley, am not insane. I hear a low footstep behind me and turn around. Consumed by a state of pure terror, I stare at what I realize to be the owner of the locker. Now that you've discovered my secret, he says fiendishly, it's time for you to go inside the locker too. And so a new voice is added to the myriad of voices doomed to the evil locker. My voice. And here's the haiku. The cold metal skin of the hot rotting body. How long? It's missing.
Well, that is great. Thanks so much for sharing that. Kind of a short story worked into there, but it actually got pulled off as a Hyben. I think you invented a new genre. Maybe we'll call it a scarebin. What do you think?
Scarebin. I think that sounds great too.
Was, yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Zachary. You did not disappoint with the creepiness of that one.
I've been waiting to get that off my chest, guys, all month.
Well, that's the locker Hyben or the locker scarebin. Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
See you guys next week.
Yep. There's Zachary Honeycutt once again. Let's go to Tom Barlow next.
Thanks, Tim.
Hey, Tom. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you. This is not a very frightening, but it is I think it fits within the regulations here. It's called Revenant.
Sounds good. Let's hear it.
My late wife starts our conversation as I prepare breakfast for the kids with a question mark in the pancake batter I've dribbled onto the griddle to test its heat. I've been expecting her to return ever since the day we first sent her into the fire, for she never allowed me the last word. So I drizzle Zoe with batter onto the griddle. When I flip that pancake over, it looks just like a kiss. I write, miss you, in response with the batter. And when I turn over those words, it clearly reads, miss you too. I begin to reply, you plus me forever with the batter, but the kids notice I'm acting oddly and give me that look that means they too are starving and not for pancakes. So I ditch our conversation. I know that if they catch on, nothing I can do will prevent the burns they will receive from hugging that hot griddle until it is again cold and lifeless. Me? I have the oven mitts.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Revenant by Tom Barlow. Excellent Halloween type poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, once again, Tom Barlow with Revenant. Next, let's go to Sharon Ferrante.
Oh, I had to get out of the chat again. Hi.
Hey, Sharon. Yeah, good to see you, Sharon.
Good to see everybody. Oh my God, Christina was great. Thank you for that interview.
Oh, great. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's one of those topics. I wonder if it's like I like a little too much for the topic, but it was enjoyable for me.
I loved it. Her poems were great. The interview was great. Yeah. Thank you so much. I didn't write about a fear, but I wrote a bunch of haiku, Halloween coup.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I took some out because I had a lot of them. But the only problem is most of them, my humor just kind of, went in there.
You can't help it. Well, that's great too. I think a couple of Katie's haiku are funny too. So I think...
Oh, I love it. This show is great.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Well, let's hear it.
Yeah. I'll get go. Blood moon until the werewolf is done. Halloween ball. Frankenstein asks for my arm. Ablaze, your guts in the oven, jack-o'-lantern. Friendly zombie, the gift of maggot pie. Halloween party, the dog bites, a vampire. In a dark alley, he follows her scent, the hunger. Midnight, before my next feeding, I hang with bats. Close up, how striking her fangs.
Oh, those are just great. I love all those. I mean, it's such great Halloween haiku. And what are we going to call those? Like
Halloween coup.
Halloween coup. We're getting a lot of syllables in there.
Halloween coup.
But those are excellent. I love those. I don't even know which was my favorite. Maybe the gotta blaze your guts in the oven jack-o'-lantern. I love that. I love the dog vampire and the maggot pie. Oh, those are all so great. Thanks for sharing those, Sharon.
The maggot pie. I've been sharing them. The maggot pie got some ew, yeah. But
well, that's the whole point. Yeah, that's great.
I had so much fun writing them. Thank you.
Well, you can tell. Yeah, thanks so much. Really enjoyed it, Sharon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. Good night and a happy Halloween.
Oh, thank you. You too.
All right, let's go to Paul Mitchell Bernstein next. Hey, Paul.
Hey, did Navadita want to go? She said she had to go to work, and someone is asking if she could go next. If she wants to go next, I'll give up my spot. But it's up to you. You're the
okay. Well,
you're the guy with the beard.
I didn't see Navadita on here. Let's do Navadita next. Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do it right after Paul. Okay. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's see. I gotta find Navy. Navy, yeah, pop on up.
Hello.
Hey, Nivy. Yeah, good to see you. It's always good to catch you before work, for sure.
Hey, Tim. I was just getting ready to leave.
Oh, good. Well, thanks again to Paul for pointing that out, because I missed you on there. There's a lot of people on the Zoom right now.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
So what do you have for us this week?
I have a prompt poem about what my fear is, and sadly, like the others, it's not funny or anything. Altogether, one day I'll wake up and see myself in the mirror and not sort of be the person that I want to be.
Oh, interesting. Come back for my Sciku later. A little preview, a little fits maybe. But anyway, let's...
So it's called A Stranger.
Okay.
A stranger. I met a stranger the other day. She was neither tall nor short, but had a face that with me would forever stay. She told me that she'd once been known for her sharp retorts, but had since been silenced by those around her, and so she started wandering around looking for support. She reminded me of someone I once knew, who, though I could not pinpoint, it could have even been you. But regardless, it had been reached, her breaking point. So I thought to help her, considering that in matters like this, I'm a connoisseur who knows what to do, but can't just quite see it through. I started to speak, but stopped, and started again, and stopped once more. For what do I tell a stranger who is so much more than a stranger? For she is but me, just chopped down to the bone by those she lives with. You might think that this is a myth, but let me tell you, the stranger I see in the mirror every day is a new me that looks exactly like me, but is not the new me I wish to be.
It's a great, The Stranger. Thanks for sharing that, Nivy. Great prompt poem. Very moving, actually. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah. And thanks, Paul, again for letting me go. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, have a good day at work. Yep, take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. It was Nivi DeKarthik once again. And I should say for Nivi, we're going to have a show at a better time maybe. There's going to be an early show coming up because we have a European guest in about 3 weeks. So that'll be fun too. But anyway, let's go back to Paul Mitchell Bernstein.
Hey, thanks,
Paul.
Tim.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. It's a great show tonight. Yeah, that was a really fun guest. I could relate to a lot of that, especially being a burnout in the 1980s, although not in Detroit.
Yeah,
but
well, Rochester. Where did you grow up, Paul?
I grew up in North Jersey, right outside of Manhattan, just south of Manhattan.
Yeah, well, so that whole Rust Belt starts kind of there and moves all the way over to Detroit. So,
yeah, it's good stuff. Okay, so I have tonight this piece. It's an older piece that I dug up that is based on what was most likely a dream. Yeah, the going to sleep with a person and then having this experience and then waking up and the person was gone and the earrings were left on the table and everything else I assume was just my imagination.
Interesting. Well, let's hear it. Go ahead.
And it's not really a poem. It's like I said, it's pretty old, so it's very different than what I write these days. It's more prose, but I'll just get right into it.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, go ahead.
The nightstand drawer of forgotten earrings. The woman in my bed screams. She points at the small black child crouched in the corner, a small black girl, not black like that, black like black. Black like wet charcoal and seaweed, like a half-human primordial lizard oozing slime. Her skin catching the lamplight as it crouched in the corner, facing the wall, whispering to itself and scratching at the floor. Ignore her, I say to the woman in my bed. She can't hurt us. I get up, I walk to the corner and shove its ungodly head down towards the floor hard enough to knock her over, knowing that she can't be knocked over. Leave, I say, get the fuck out of here. But her feet stay put as if nailed to the floor. She's whispering, hissing something reptilian. She is comfortable with being shoved, hit with lamps and boiling water, burned by cigarettes. She feels nothing. She just scratches at the floor, whispering something. The woman in my bed gets up, terrified. In a panic, she begins to dress. Please, I say, don't go. She can't hurt us. She won't go until she wants to, but she can't hurt us, please. But the woman who is in my bed leaves, and in her rush forgets her earrings on the nightstand. So I put them in the drawer with all the others. I lie down on the bed, light a cigarette, and turn the volume on the television up as loud as it will go, so I can't hear the scratching and the whispering. Then there's a pounding on the wall from next door. I'm telling you for the last time, turn down that goddamn television.
Oh, that was great, Paul. I would disagree with you that that's prose. I think people ask all the time what the difference between poetry and prose is, or what a prose poem is. And it's definitely a prose poem with all that rhyme and alliteration and rhythm going on in there. It's great.
Oh, I didn't even know it was.
Well, it is. I mean, you got like I don't know, there's all sorts of things, like the leaves and the please, there's all sorts of rhymes in there. Great rhythm too. It's great. Excellent work, Paul. Thanks for sharing it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. Paul Mitchell Bernstein with The Nightstand Drawer of Forgotten Earrings. Great title too. Let's go next. Let's find some first-time callers, or close to first-time callers maybe. Let's go to Eva Christine.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. I think it's your first time, right? Have you been on before?
Oh, I have not. I'm very nervous, actually.
There's nothing to be nervous about. We're just hanging out, friends, sharing some poems. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Wenatchee, Washington.
Ah.
Derek Sheffield was my professor.
Oh,
so he introduced me to this, so I love it, and I'm slightly terrified.
No need to be terrified. And I think you are close to Mel's Hole. So if you want to take a field trip with Derek, go down.
Oh, there you go.
See if you can find it. I think it's a good thing to suggest.
Oh, he's out of my league. He's so professional.
He's great. Yeah, he was the guest. I don't know if you saw. He was a guest 2 years ago or so.
That's when I was studying English Lit in his class. We had to do it for extra credit. So yeah. So I'm a newbie, and I wrote a poem about being afraid to talk to someone, because that's always been a fear of mine. So I was doing some inner child like healing work. So I wrote Afraid.
Excellent. Yeah, can't wait to hear it.
Okay, so it's called Afraid by Eva Christine. If I wasn't afraid, I would have said some things to you. If I wasn't afraid, I would do more than whisper and say what I wanted. But I am afraid. I'm afraid because I think you see everything in me. I think you always have. But I'm afraid. I wish I wasn't, but I am. I'd rather be here than anywhere because at least I can pretend.
Oh, that was great. I love the realness of that fear, because it is the number one fear is that kind of thing of approaching people and talking and sharing. And so glad you could share that poem and on the open lines too. That's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, I'm glad I figured it out because I had no idea where you guys went. I was like, where did you guys go? So now I know where you go. So now I can read now I can start reading again.
Yeah, come back next week anytime you'd like. We'd love to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was Eva Christine with Afraid, another fear-based poem. Let's go to Angela Gartner. Hasn't been here in a while. Good to see you, Angela. How you doing?
Good. I've been really busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. You got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of soccer this time of year, I imagine, too, in addition to all the work and things. So how you been?
Good. It is definitely Poe month, though. Like, it's nice to hear some Poe stuff. I just, a couple weeks ago, I went to someone who performs some Poe stories. And then, I've been getting... It's kind of like my month sometimes just to focus on him. But, I read a recent story. I haven't actually read it. And I was like, wow, this is such a good story. If anyone wants to read it, it's Some Words with a Mummy by Poe. And if anyone's read it, it's amazing. It's about, him going in and them unwrapping a mummy. And it just reminds me how Poe is so amazing with words and ideas. My all-time favorite is Premature Burial forever. It will be my favorite. Mm-hmm. But it's just, every time I read a Poe story, I feel like I learn something new. So but this is definitely a Poe month, so make sure to read Poe.
It definitely is, and we had that whole poetry space about Poe last week, so check that out if you want. It's really, he's such a fascinating person. I think somebody on the space, there were a bunch of people there. I think Paul Mitchell Bernstein, Brian O'Sullivan was definitely there, a bunch of other people. Someone mentioned that like he should be considered, like people say, Dickinson and Whitman are like the mother and father of American poetry or something, but Poe is like I mean, I don't know, he might be above them both. So.
Well, I think he's definitely the father of, horror. I mean, as much as Stephen King has always talked about him, and I know Lovecraft is in the conversation, but I feel like he's even better than that. So I definitely feel like he really, he brings, and, for such a short lifespan he's had, he's definitely brought something to just the voice, because sometimes he talks like he's like this first person and very clinical, and then other times it's not. So he brings you don't realize how many different voices he has, which is, and then he brings poetry in it. It goes all around for him. So
yeah, he definitely
does. But my story is kind of silly, in a way. It's definitely creepy. It can be. It's actually an old story that I kind of reworked a little bit about a werewolf. Definitely I'll write later about a fear when I have time. But yeah, it's just a cute little, just a Halloween story that I actually, again, I reworked it.
Well, it's perfect. I have it up for everybody. Yeah, I can't wait.
Okay. And I'm sorry if you heard the dog. Do you know where the werewolf sleeps after Halloween? A late group of teenagers who were listening to punk on their headphones, asking for candy. Mom turned off the light and...
Oh, are you there? Angela, you froze.
Grace sighting.
Hey, Angela.
Mom heard this.
Angela, and I cut you off. You froze there for a bit, and we missed like a whole bunch of the poem for some reason.
Oh, okay.
So,
hopefully that doesn't happen.
Take it from the top.
Okay. I'm in a new house, and this side of the house isn't as good as the other one. So, but the dogs are on the other side. So
yeah, it looked fine. I think it was something weird that happened because your connection looks great. I mean, it's powerful and clear. I think something happened. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Okay. A late group of teenagers were listening to punk on their headphones asking for candy. Mom turned off the light and shooed them away. I remember that night I saw the werewolf with his snarling snout staring in our front window. He began banging his fist on our gray siding. Mom heard the screams coming from my bed. She told me to sleep. She had an early morning. It was only a nightmare and no werewolf was there. He was there, hiding between the two houses. I told him he needed to leave before I called animal control, who would take him away in a collar, where he would wait to be adopted. I thought maybe the werewolf is lonely and no one would talk to him. He didn't listen. He left the house, but after 20 years, he hasn't gone. Not completely. He comes back with a leather jacket and furry mane, hoping to catch me snoozing. The season of spooky charms brings him to my home. This year, I won't be safe, even if my life is on.
Oh, that is great. Very fun. Thanks so much for sharing that, Angela. Lovely Halloween poem there. Oh, and you froze again, but just in time to
Okay,
finish
that's it. I'm sure I want to get even more. Yeah, next year more scary when I have time. I have a.
Oh, we lost you again, Angela.
Oh,
all right. Yeah,
all right.
It's
Thanks,
all right.
bye.
Yeah, but bye. Thanks. It's always great to see you, though. That was Angela Gartner with Do You Know Where the Werewolf Sleeps After Halloween? Excellent work there. Let's go to Clayton Clark.
Hi there.
Hey, Clayton. Good to see you.
Great night.
Yeah, it definitely is. I love the Halloween. The time of year is wonderful time of year.
Mine might not be that creepy, but let's see what happens. It's about fear.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that is, all fears apply. So let's see yours.
It's called cosmicophobia, but I think the actual name is cosmophobia. But Psych Times called it cosmicophobia, and I liked it better.
I like that too.
So cosmicophobia. Psych Times calls it the irrational fear of cosmic phenomenon, and goes on to explain that just thinking about the universe may cause pain and panic attacks in some. Irrational seems pretty rational to me, to be overwhelmed by the dark energy and matter and all that expanse, or by my neighbor across the street who stalks her driveway like a live gargoyle in stretchy pants, always trying to load me up with her absurd abundance of Meyer lemons. I'm afraid to go out. Imagine space full of such things, even after death, with nowhere to hide. It could go on ad infinitum, ad nauseum, and all a person would have to hold on to is the fact that they were very, very rational and right as they toil, tumble, and flail forever in the cosmic ununderstandable between and beyond the sparkly stars.
Thanks so much for sharing that. That was excellent. Cosmicophobia. And it's funny, I was talking about being afraid that there's nothing more to the reality, but equal to that fear somehow is that there is something more. And I was thinking about that even as I was saying it. I was like, wait a minute, but it's also, I don't know. And once you get down to it, it's all it's all frightening either way. Yeah, excellent poem. Thanks for sharing that, Clayton.
Thanks for tonight.
Yep, thank you. Clayton Clark with Cosmicophobia. Let's go to... should I make something I got out of line? Let's go to Joe Cottonwood next.
Okay.
Hi, Joe.
I wrote about fear, but it's a very specific fear. It's fear of flying.
Ah, okay.
And as I got into it, I realized that my fear isn't near what other people's fear is. So the poem sort of moved me in a different direction.
Well, that's always a good sign for a good poem. So Yeah.
The poem took me kind of by the collar and moved me around.
Oh, it's the best kind. I'm excited.
Okay, this is called Jet Blue Flight 615, which I recently was on. Jet Blue Flight 615. Her fingers tremble like feathers ruffled by breeze. You, too, feel your bones are not meant to fly, but this woman in the middle seat with naked nerves begins to hum and apologize. Please excuse the music. It's like hiccups when you get scared, can't stop. Jets are damn noisy, but you hear gospel hymns. Free-floating moonlight sonata, followed by Fly Me to the Moon, and then more. She is a Spotify of hums. From New York to San Francisco, she pauses only to chew pretzels or drink water while your death grip on the armrest loosens. You can tap on your keyboard toward your deadlines. At touchdown, she apologizes again. Thank you for putting up with me. And you realize you've been smiling. Not outwardly, not a grin, but a softening of jaw through this journey, thanks to the power of humming. A lighter state of mind. How the mockingbird takes wing.
Oh, I love that ending, Joe. That was great. JetBlue Flight 615. Thanks for sharing that, Joe. Really great turn in that poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joe Cottonwood. Once again, let's go to Jennifer Fossil next. I think Jennifer's been on before, but not for a while. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi. I loved that last poem. I was just trying to comment, but I'll finish
Yeah,
that in a
it was a
minute.
good one. I love anytime they sort of take you by the collar. I know that's going to be a good sign. That
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I decided to write about loss, which is, I guess, my number one fear. And there's the anticipatory loss of, fearing people you will lose at some point or may lose, and then there's kind of the fear of the despair for those that you've lost. And so that's what I wrote about. And then I really appreciated the conversation with Christina, because I think you were really kind of going back and forth between the disbelief and the belief, and I find myself doing the same thing. And I think for me, kind of what comes between those two sometimes is memory and remembering. So that's what my poem is about.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, and well said too. Yeah, let's hear it.
Thank you. Anything you could want. We'll get us a mausoleum and we'll come out at night and grill on the patio, Aunt Grace decreed. I was a kid then and giggled at the thought of our skeletons clacking and skittering in the muggy air of a summer night. What did I know of death but the visit to the cemetery on Decoration Day, running amongst graves as my grandmothers picked their way carefully down the hill to lay pots of geraniums above long-dead husbands. No sadness that I could sense, at most a mellowed remembrance of men who spent their week's pay at the beer garden, men who left for a loaf of bread and returned 3 days later with sour breath and no bread. We'll go get lunch at Midway after we finish up here, my mother said. What do they have? I asked. Oh, anything you could want, she told me. I tried to imagine that anything and grew anxious with the void that rose before me. Like what? I persisted. Oh, like a hot dog, Mom said. Won't be long before I'm here pushing up daisies, Lala joked. We laughed, and I saw fields of them, their sunny faces ringed with white. Anything you could want. Hot dogs burning on the grill, potato salad growing warm in the sticky air of a day loping toward evening, Mamaw with her fly swatter, the tang of mosquito spray spritzed on bare legs sticky and grooved with the webbed patterns of lawn chairs. Cold slices of watermelon, black seeds the only nuisance in sweet pink flesh. The promise of ice cream from the hand-cranked bucket, the wonder of how salt and ice and sweat can yield such magic. Adult chatter and dusk creeping in, sit a spell. The spell of the grown-ups' voices that hum and drone of safety and things not understood. Dreading the moment the spell is broken and the women start gathering up paper plates for the trash, christening the grass with watered-down cups of Kool-Aid and iced tea. 40 years on, and we are a family of ghosts, gathered like the remains of a midsummer feast. Some in urns by the door, others in a high-rise vault, an efficiency apartment for the dearly departed, others in the ground, bones shrouded in the lacework dress chosen when chemo failed. Still lugging heavy pots of geraniums each May. A sensible flower. Douse it with one last drink from the plastic jug, and I'm on my way. No daisies that I can see. Anything you could want. Kindly white bones, onion skin, leaves, shadow play, granite vacancy.
Well, they're great hyben. I mean, we get a lot of great hybens these days. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was Jennifer Fossil with Fear. Or no, Anything You Could Want is the title. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Next, let's go to Marianne Abdo. Marianne hasn't been on in a bit. Hey, Marianne.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
So very quickly, for all us Poe fans, this is my book. It's Edgar Allan Poe, Complete Tales and Poems. I got this for a Christmas gift last year. It's from Castle Books, so it's one of my favorite ones. Very thick, too. It has all his poetry and different prose and behind the scenes. So I sent you, it's called The Samhain Hunter's Moon. I kind of added more to it. It's like a Celtic mythology just in time for Halloween. So A Samhain Hunter's Moon. Father Earth and Taurus the bull are celebrating the dance of nocturnal and solar animals, watching and waiting for Samhain's bonfires to ignite. The gnarled roots of Adler, oak, and Celtic trees of life come together, the spirits of our ancestors, appearing when the banshees' wailing cries were calling her dead to join the living. Passing through the misty, broken, veiled shadows of that murky green loch, wolves looming over a dark, rocky ridge, are howling towards an orange hunter's moon, eyeing Morrigan's, their phantom queen, as she morphed into 3 raven shrieking sisters, summoning the magical people to do their bidding, known as the Tudor of the Dawn, obeying Morrigan's commands, gathering dead pine trees to create a red roaring fire, beating the skins from their raucous burans, making haste for one and all to commence, hearing the raven sisters' detached screams echo through a midnight timber grove, waking up Eileen McMidden, the fire-breathing goblin from his 364th day of slumber. And with the snarling of his first breath, Samhain's fires were stoked, reaching past the kingdom of the clouds, casting an eerie red-orange glow over Ire until dawn's first light.
Excellent Halloween poem, The Samhain Hunter's Moon. Thanks so much for sharing that, Marianne.
Thank you. Great show, and happy Halloween, everybody.
Yeah, happy Halloween to you, too.
Take care.
Yep, that was Marianne Abdo with A Samhain Hunter's Moon. Next, let's go to Rob Harris.
Hello.
Hey, Rob, what you got for us?
How are you?
I'm great.
Good. Well, I originally wrote this as The Poets Respond, but it deals with death, and it also deals with what at one point was probably my greatest fear, which is drowning. The passing of Matthew Perry the other day came almost too late to really write anything for Poets Respond, so I just wrote this morning, and I added a scary title, a spooky title, I hope. But it goes like this. It's and I knew early on this was going to rhyme. It's called Beware the Hot Tub.
Hey, go ahead.
Whenever something makes you feel good, you naturally want to have more. But too much of anything's unhealthy, so we need to temper that sport. Using too much booze or drugs can take an obvious toll. Too much time in the jacuzzi appears a less perilous role. Spending much time in the water when it's heated to a high degree carries with it some risk that's not always easy to see. I've never seen a hot tub that doesn't come with a warning. Perhaps he didn't abide this, and millions of fans are in mourning. Thanks to Matthew Perry for the laughs and the courage to face his own troubles. But let's remember the way that he died. There's danger along with the bubbles.
Yeah, that's definitely a fear and something that's a serious thing. So many people have lost their lives that way.
We're waiting for the toxicology, and that's going to go a long way in determining how his story is written. But even before that comes in, we know that he was pulled out of a hot tub, and so let's remember they like you said, they can be very dangerous. So that's my work. Thanks for listening to it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Rob. There's Rob Harris with Beware the Hot Tub.
Sure.
Let's go to Brian O'Sullivan next. Brian was today's poet on Rattle.com. So a good day for Brian. Good to see you, Brian.
Thanks so much for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, I love that poem, and that was a prompt poem too. We should mention, because that was
absolutely was.
I had to look it up because I didn't know. Who the actual guest was. I remembered it was someone else that came up with it, and it was Sonia Greenfield. So she was in January. She had a show. And she wanted you to Google if you need whatever it was. If you need,
it was Google like if you if you don't something, and then one letter, and then fill in the rest. It was great.
Yeah, really exactly. It was if you don't. That's what it is. If you don't, and then one letter, and then you write a poem about that. And so you got fall, and excellent sestina coming out of that one. But what do you have for tonight for the spooky open lines?
Oh, I have a poem about my deep-seated fear of reading a poem on the Rattlecast.
Well, I think a lot of people can relate. It's hard for me to like to me it's like nothing. It's like no big deal. We're just hanging out having poems, but people always tell me that it's nerve-wracking, and especially early on. So I totally understand. But only through other people, because for me it just seems like, why would it be nervous? We're just hanging out sharing poems.
I think it's important for me to say, I mean, in reality, absolutely the nicest, safest, most supportive place to read a poem is just a nightmare version for fun. Okay. I am reading my fear poem on the Rattlecast, and suddenly I realize that my title is a little long and kind of on the nose, and that the whole premise might be a bit too meta, and that in the middle of the thing, there is a bad 575 haiku that doesn't even have a cut, no cut. And that's all, and that it's all as cliched as the sestina is long, and that I repeat and that too often, and that my throat is dry and my voice is cracking and I'm stubbing over my words, and that the images veer from non-existent to over the top, and that somehow the poem at once twists and turns like a bag of squirrels and lies flat and turnless upon the page. My words drop and splatter like rotten pumpkins filled with Limburger cheese, and the silences between words hiss, rattle, and bite. I finish reading my fear poem. Katie says nothing. Dick Westheimer's kind face has vanished from Zoom, leaving behind a message saying, after hearing this poem, I no longer like poetry. Odd Writings posts a multidimensional palindrome declaring in every direction that I suck. Even Sharon Ferrante looks, and I did not think that this was possible, perturbed. Almost all you gentle poets cry out to the muses to smite me down and reject my poem from the anthology of life. I begin to worry that I have been offensive. Only Nate Jacobs is still smiling, but his beard has transmogrified into tentacles, reaching through my screen to drag me down to hell. Tim raises an eyebrow, says, interesting poem, and moves on. This is what I was afraid of.
I was going to try to say interesting poem. And then I couldn't keep it in. That was really funny, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. That was really fun.
Read.
Yep. That was Brian O'Sullivan with I am reading my fear poem on the Rattlecast. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. Next up, let's go. I think I'm not sure if Rosalind Stroll has been on before, maybe once. Hey, Rosalind. Yep, you have to unmute still. You have to unmute your Zoom, Rosalind. Not yet. There's a button. It's on the on your Zoom window. It's like the very lower, very left button. There you go. Hello.
Hi. That was just a glitch on the iPad. Sorry.
Perfect. Well, I'm so glad you could join us. I don't think you've been on before, have you? Or have you been on once or twice?
No, I sent in a poem, and and you read it. I couldn't figure out all the how-tos.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'm so glad. Yeah.
I'm finally moving from listener to reader.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. So what do you have to share tonight?
Well, a fear of mine is just fear of fear itself. And I could call this the gut poem, but it's really, I was so glad when polyvagal theory came out and they justified that, yes, indeed, I feel the dream in my gut before it, and sometimes it doesn't make it to my brain and imagery. So I was trying to put that into words, and this is what came out. So I just called it fear, but I could call it anything. In some dark grove, under the bark, a fat grub curls to the shape of this sphere. The global head, the ignorant eyes, the long, soft swells are growing. It smells of butter. Such a sweet round loaf could be so easily bitten by some transient bird. I'm hoping it will leave this lodging, though I cannot tell it so. How it would mock me, make me go. Beyond belief, by some magician's trickery, there may yet burst from this sleek skin a moth, a rabbit, a howling pack of wolves, something with bones and clearly stated edges. Meanwhile, it is ravenous with this one appetite, and the hollow log of my belly is consumed in the greedy night.
Oh, excellent ending, especially. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was a great poem, Rosalind.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was Fear.
Fear.
Yeah, by Rosalind Stroll. Thanks for going. Once again, great to have you on. Hope you come back soon. I'm glad that all the technology works now. Next, let's go to Guy Chambers.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Guy. Yeah, what you got for us?
Yeah, I got actually a prompt poem here for a change here.
Nice,
so I started reading this last weekend, and then when you had this prompt, hey, it fits right in. So
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll call this one Tap. Crawling into bed on a cold, windy night. Nobody in the house, not even a mouse. It's just a quiet night. Time to turn out the lights and sleep tight. A tap on the window. Then again. What's with that? A tap on the window. Is my friends trying to pull a crank on me? A tap on the window. They're trying to scare me because they know I'm all alone. A tap on the window. It's not going to work, thinking it's a ghost. A tap on the window. Go away, buckos. A tap on the window. It's not them. A tap on the window. Maybe somebody's trying to break in. A tap on the window. Should I hide underneath the covers? A tap on the window. Maybe I should hide underneath the bed. A tap on the window. My phone is downstairs. I can't phone the police. A tap on the window. Go away. I'm in here with a baseball bat. A tap on the window. Maybe I'll turn on the lights and pull the curtains back fast. A tap on the window. I'll surprise them and they'll take off. A tap on the window. Nobody's there. My heart starts thrashing. A tap on the window. Oh, it's just a branch in the wind tapping on the window. A tap on the window. What a relief. A tap on the window. I can turn out the lights out and go back to sleep. A tap on the window. Why was I thinking these crazy things? A tap on the window. I'm covering up and having a good night's sleep. A tap on the window. A tap on the window. A tap on the window. Oh my God! Oh my God! The window is slowly opening. Like that.
That's great. Thanks so much for doing that, Guy. I love the refrain of the tap on the window. That was a really great, creepy Halloween poem. That was excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, I just left the ending for everybody else to finish it off, wherever they feel to be good.
Yeah, I mean, I when I moved into this house, it's 100 years old, tiny little cabin.
Yeah.
And we were joking with my kids about that there's a seance down there because there's this weird
Yeah.
basement and there's some chairs that they just have
Yeah.
down there. And the first night I was all alone and I kept hearing little creaks and kept
Creaks,
imagining,
yeah.
and I was like, no, don't be ridiculous. You're 43 years old. Stop doing it. But it does.
Yeah,
Your
I'll-
mind plays tricks on you in the middle of the night all alone, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
You get a little something like that, and your mind just goes off and just starts going out everywhere,
It definitely does.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing that, Guy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yep, take care. It's Guy Chambers with Tap. Great title, too. Thanks, Guy. All right, next, let's go to Bishwajit Mishra.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Bishwajit, what do you have for us? You are so happy all the time. It's hard to imagine you being afraid of anything.
No, I'm afraid. I don't know, but this is real. I don't know. The poem I'm going to read. It might happen when I was very young, but still, I have some kind of a remnant feeling, and that's what I try to write. But let me. There's a word called madal. It's kind of drum, Indian drum, which has got both sides, and you hit both sides. You can put it on around your neck with a strap, or so. And the poem is called "The Drum." It's based on that fear. I hope so.
Okay.
The drum, dum dum dum, in the evening, and somehow rain. The somber wetness rather than the patter makes that vivid, even now. Of that evening might have been a Saturday, and the memory of me clinging to someone, possibly my mom. I must have been very little, but that night, someone must have told me. I thought of death guard's stooges making a call for somebody, and they would come for my mom if I wasn't a good boy. But why someone would say that? I wasn't bad, for most part, as much as I remember. But there was someone else with my mother, because I remember their giggles. Yet that sound, dum, 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 from a madal or two. And I think I knew, I still know where that sound came from. I mean, which part of our little town. And it must have been a drunk wage earner having a little jamming session after drinking a part of his wage on his way home, after the money lender would have collected his never-ending interest, after getting his weekly wage. Now I know why it must have been a Saturday. And after all these years, after I have known that's not right, after I have always known my mom loved me very dearly, in spite of there being four of us for her handful, the sound springs up, live-like, smell of my favorite childhood dish, smell of those Rajnigandha flowers on our nuptial night, smell of the dead body of someone mixed with incense sticks while he was lying on a bed of ice waiting for his son's arrival. Very vivid fear, like sweating of weak walls in monsoon. Although I know that shadow has no real entity, making that shadow a non-entity as well. But the fear still soaks up, not merely as a non-committal embarrassment, but like those walls. And I have known monsoon, and I have known those weeping walls.
Oh, excellent ending, especially. Thanks for sharing that, Bishwajit. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
The fear comes back real psychologically, doesn't it? Yeah, great poem.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Great show, really.
Thanks. That was The Drum by Bishwajit Mishra. Let's go next to Mary Lisa DiDominicius.
Hello.
Hey, Mary Lisa, good to see you tonight.
Yeah, good to see everybody. Oh, what a great night. And also, I listened on Thursday to Katie and to Timothy, and I think somebody was Brian on there? Somebody else was on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brian was on there
Talking
too.
about-
He went to the Poe Fest and had
Yeah.
a lot of great thoughts about Poe too. Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. So I'm hoping that the poem I read tonight maybe mirrors him a little bit, because he was also, one of my first influences. So let me go here.
Okay.
Okay. This is called September Seeding. We said it was, but was it dark we feared beneath our sleep at night? Or was it dark within the being, lying nearest to our being? Or was it dark inside the strangers, scheming far from where we rested, whom we feared most when we spoke of dark? And why did we fear dark as strange, when dark was where we sparked? Why did we mourn light as lost, when dark was what our bodies parted from as they were born? Dark, soft, giving flesh, encased and fed, then braced to loose us from its underside into knowing. Dark, soft, giving flesh that we were, then were not. Broken from the beginning, from a dark we forgot, as we forget stars thrown into light appear to disappear, although still there. Broken from the dark, seed, encased, then freed, and dropped back into dark. Why shouldn't we put roots down to continue on after? The seed is cradled after it breaks. The seed discovers another mother in the same dark earth we fear disappearing into. Why shouldn't we put roots down to continue on after? Why should we fear dark will harm when fear is where we come from? We are less afraid of the dark than we are of being alone. Afraid of death most, but afraid of being alone. Afraid of death maybe for that. No one there. No one there.
Yeah, really well said. Totally true. September Seeding. Thanks for sharing that, Mary Lisa. Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Great night. Good night.
Good night. There's Mary Lisa D. Dominicius with September Seeding. Thanks for everybody's patience for being online. We have a lot of people here still. Several people left. Let's go next to Brent Stauffer.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Brent. Great to see you again. I'm glad that work and things moved around so you can be joining us live again.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been enjoying it. I'm a little spooked, but in a good way. I don't know. I can't get over thinking of Nate's beard doing like this.
I know, the tentacles coming out through the screen. Oh my gosh.
But it was really also funny because I had it on the gallery view so I could see everybody, and Katie was just being destroyed by that poem.
Yeah, I wish we could unmute her microphone. I'm sure it would have been a lot of loud laughter. It's true.
But that was a tour de force for real. This poem is a little bit sort of itself Halloweeny in that it's been risen from the dead. It's like a 3-year-old poem, but when I read the prompt, I was like, "Oh, I have that. I have the poem for that." So I resurrected it, and you know how you do when you find a poem, a 3-year-old poem that you haven't done anything with. You chop it all up and you rearrange it and you Frankenstein monster it and you do all sorts of things, and so that's what we've got. It's pretty self-explanatory with the title, I think. So
Franken poem. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, it's called Panic Attack at the Dollar Tree. Because sometimes nothing is scarier than going into a Dollar Tree.
That's true.
And that's what this is about. Okay. A crow squats on a lamppost and complains about how slowly I get out of the car. His condemnations beat above me like helicopter blades. Head bowed, I stride across the tilting, uneven pavement and descend. A howling child stands up in a green shopping cart, the maw of a Venus flytrap. Overhead fluorescence casts down sickly coolness, flickering 1,000 bursts a second. Change rattles in the cashier's palm like castanets. Acrid disinfectant fumes rise up, rush up from shimmering floors. Lanes 2 and 6 are crammed with people murmuring in code. I steer my listing body toward a tower of sunglasses. I'm walking through space. I'm lurching through space. I'm faltering through space. I am in the mirror looking down from the rows of dark shades. I see a man looking up, but he can't help. I can't breathe. This beard is someone else's beard, so foreign and heavy, massive and barren. I'm going to die. No word weighs down any color or form into the known. Everything exists entirely on its own. Is this freedom?
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing that. I
Yeah.
used to,
Okay.
I would have said I could totally relate because that's how I felt going into the Dollar Tree. But Katie Dozier has introduced me to party supplies and how nice it is.
Oh, no.
There's some great stuff in there, actually. There's some good deals. And now my sunglasses that I used to they break all the time. I used to get expensive ones.
Yeah,
Now I
yeah.
just get $2 sunglasses. And when they break, I'm like, okay, no problem. I got 4 last time. So I'm just shift to the next pair.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The Dollar Tree, actually, if you're in the right frame of mind and you don't stay in there too long, can be a wonderful place. The trick is to get in and get out before things get weird.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Or just go with Katie. That works too.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, but thanks for sharing that. Really vivid
right,
poem.
thanks.
Put me in the fear space for sure. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
I'll see y'all later.
That was Brent
Good night.
Stauffer with Panic Attack at the Dollar Tree. Monica Dovos is next. Thanks for your patience, Monica. It's been a while. I knew this was going to be a long open line, so thanks. We have a few people on the line still, and I'm glad that you're sticking around and sharing poems. Hey, Monica.
Hello, everyone. So very happy to be here. I'm not a prom poem type of girl, so I'm so happy that Katie comes up with these great prompts.
That's
So
great.
here's a prom poem. The first step in writing a poem about fears is to make a list. Heights, Mormon dentists, villanelles, words that don't exist in English, but they should, like mistrina, a mustache worn by middle-aged women against their own accord. Bunions, although onions are fine, especially red, soaking in olive oil, drizzled with balsamic vinegar. Bushy, red-headed beards, Dijon mustard, where it lands, leprechauns, what they tell you in dreams, my son calling me a bad mother if I get a divorce. The second step is crossing out all fears you will never write about. High-heeled, fishnet stocking legs, airport parking lots. I thought I left it on M. Meeting new people, what they hold in their hearts. Sestinas, swallowing my tongue in sleep. Breaking mayonnaise. My sister always tells me avoid olive oil. So good for your hair, though. Getting lost in Fresno. Making a blunder in oral, English. Forgetting Romanian. My accordion heart at night. Not being able to write a poem ever again. Dying alone in a tiny house, and I own a cat.
Great poem. That was Monica Moo with the first step in writing a poem about fears is to make a list. A great example, too, of how if you are trying to write a poem and having trouble, just make a list and then listen to what the poem wants to say. A great example of how that works in that. Thanks for sharing that, Monica.
It's a good last resort for me when I'm like out of inspiration. I'm just gonna write a list.
Yeah, and then they start taking their own way. It's like you create something and then it does something on its own. It's amazing how that works. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was Monica Moo again with the first step in writing a poem about fear is to make a list. Gail Hemmen is next.
Okay. Hi, you guys. I stayed up. I stayed up late tonight.
You did.
So let's see. Oh boy. Oh, here we go. Emily Dickinson taking the top of your head off. Chainsaw Massacre. Walking. I'm having fun being haunted tonight. Walking past the bookcase at night. Matches in the moonlight for all of us insomniacs. And definitely poetry helps me stay on a healthy path here, so I appreciate that. And the worker's shoe shine sign. Many years later, only partially faded. Thank you guys for the scary poems tonight.
Oh, excellent. Thanks so much. I hope you get some sleep. Hope we didn't keep you up and too scary tonight for you, Gail. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, it's awesome. My cat says hi too. Thanks, guys.
Great. It was Gail Hemmon with some haiku. The Emily Dickinson one really made... I didn't mean to laugh, but the Chainsaw Massacre came out of nowhere.
Good. I think that's what she wanted.
I think so. Thanks, Gail. Next up, we have Odd Writings. George Pastana. Hey, George.
Hey, Tim. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to have you. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's been a long wait. Didn't mean to... Yeah, I don't want anybody to have to go last, but that's how the order goes. And you're not last. There's a couple people left still, I should say, too. But how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Okay, so this is a prompt poem, and I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then there were three. Outside the dark, the fireflies, meteor, our younger selves jarring sparks, the stars foretold. We pluck leaves as autumn winter's cold. Inside the valley of the kings, the pharaohs fold their hands, deny the royal flesh the robbers claim to hold. We pluck leaves as autumn winter's cold. Beneath her cloudy cataracts, Niagara's uncontrolled. She pummels soft the limestone our parents mold. We pluck leaves as autumn winter's cold.
I love the rhymes and repetition there. That was George Pastana with, and then there were three. And you know what, George? There are literally, there are three people left. So then there were three. That's the kind of thing we were talking about.
That's kind of scary.
That stuff happens all the time with the Rattlecast, though. I'm not even joking. Like, there's three people left. I had no idea that was going to be the poem, and then there it is. And it really creeps me out. And maybe subconsciously, I knew that was going to be the title, and then not even knowing it. But I was going in order, so I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. It's freaky. And it's not the first time, and by a long shot.
Well, that's very cool. Thanks for having me on, and I'll log off and scoot on over to the other one where I can see the poems, so I get to read the last three. So that's cool.
Excellent.
Right,
much better over there. Thanks, George. Always a pleasure. There's George Pastana with "Then There Were Three," so strangely. Okay, and Laura Berg next.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. Good to see you.
You know, I just I have a very strong memory of single pane windows in Rochester when I was growing up, and the frost would grow on the inside of the window, on the outside.
Definitely, it's cold, and not like here. It's cold up in the mountains of Southern California, but dry, so that doesn't really happen. But yeah.
Well, okay, so this is a fear of the bug in the ear, but it's also the bug. It's a terrible fear for the bug too, I think, for the person and the bug. Fearful bug in the ear. A moth veers into the funnel of an ear, drawn to wax as others are to flame. It is a mini torture to feel that bug despair against the cranial nerve, wings a thrum, bodies stoking the drum of darkness. Aye, the gardener swats at his head, stumbling toward the shed and cries, why has my Eden turned? Doubts start and sting, what have I made? Only later he'll marvel, just one and so tiny huge.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and I never thought about that poor bug in the ear before. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Laura.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night. Always a pleasure. There's a Laura Berg with a fearful bug in the ear. And last up, Dick Westheimer did come back. He has something for us on the spooky angle. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. You know, I've been thinking about this fear thing and spookiness, and there's some like missing gene in me. Like I can be scared of things in real time, but I can't imagine.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So like I don't, like this Art Bell stuff. It's like, I'll analyze every story, like you couldn't have a string 15 miles long because, rather than get into the storyline, it just, it's a weird thing. But
so how did you pull off within a space of an
I didn't
hour
pull
with
them
having
off.
no fear gene?
I found one.
You found one. Okay.
I did not. No, that would have been rude not to listen to other people's poems. So
So
I did find one called Antlers Alive, and I sent you two. Pick out the second one
Okay.
because I did make some changes on it.
Okay, sounds good.
And this is as close as it gets for me. You know, so,
Well, it's so fascinating to me though how different people are. You know, like that whole thing about some people can't visualize like the apple. Have you seen that meme where it's like if you could picture an apple, like some people see the word apple and some people see like a black and white image of like a logo or like an emoji apple, and some people see a real apple, and like how, you know, and I don't have like a God gene, definitely, like I don't understand that experience, and I know there's so many different ways we experience the world. That's, I guess, what makes poetry so fascinating too, is that we all have a different way of seeing, and thank God for that.
You were talking about it earlier about you know, like this sense of you know, the beyond, and you know, you would be scared of it just being a materialistic world, and I'm going, that gives me comfort. Right. So it's like we're just, incidentally, nice shirt.
I was just thinking the same thing, Dick. Really excellent fashion taste. I think my squares are smaller, whatever that means.
Yeah, well, you're younger. Whatever. I'm sure that's it. But anyway, this is Antlers Alive, and it's the closest thing. I searched for the word fear in my and I think this one fits the bill. And it has a little formal quality to it. Antlers Alive. I found the skull, the rack intact, deep in the hills up from the creek, bleached and stripped of all its flesh, all hollow eyes and bony cheeks. This is real, incidentally. And somehow still it felt alive. I set it on the garden bench to warn the others to leave alone all I have planted there, tomatoes, beans, and corn. One day it was gone from its shelf and left a shadow of osseous dust, the corn and beans and maters ravaged to the ground and crushed, and fences all taken down. I spent the day salvaging the few plants left and mending fences, sorting curses from prayers about the contest between deer and me and growing things. As I walked back from the garden beds, I noted on the bench the intact racks, two empty sockets, twin wells of dread.
I think there's definitely some creepiness in that poem, Dick, and having seen your garden with all the elaborate things you have to go through to fight off those deer, I can relate, like, on multiple levels now too.
Well, it used to be just this skull seemed to keep them out, and the whole notion of don't say the word deer in the garden.
Yeah, well, that's great. And everybody should know, Dick has the most amazing garden. He made us, we stopped by and had some pizza with all the veggies on it. And it was literally the best meal I've ever had in my life. So,
it was pretty good company too.
Well, I'm so glad that the skull worked is what I'm getting to. So
for a while.
Yeah. For a while. Yeah, excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Dick. I'm so glad you could come back.
Thanks. Bye.
Right, bye. It was Dick Westheimer with Antlers Alive. And that is going to wrap up the Rattlecast. So I knew it was going to be a long open lines, and that's great. We had so many wonderful poems. Thanks everybody who shared them. Hey, Kitty, you want to come back and tell us what you're thinking about for the prompt poem for next week?
First, I'm thinking those poems were amazing, and I have to thank Brian O'Sullivan for making me laugh harder than I have ever laughed at any poem ever. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that definitely was. It was hard to, I have a mute button, fortunately. So there was that saving me.
If we'd been in person, I think I would have blown your microphone. Like, it is really lucky that I was not there. Like, it was so loud over here. And it was like streaming tears. It was a whole thing. Yeah. So first of all, there's that.
Especially, we're supposed to be scary, and it was like the funniest poem we've had.
I love that. I think it's like the most wholesome thing ever. Like, everybody set out to be scary, and we were like, we're funny. We were like the Charlie Brown special or something.
Yeah, thanks. So for next week's prompt, what do you have in mind?
for next week. So what I was taken about with Christina's wonderful poems in part was that they all seem to kind of take place within the shadows in one way or another. I mean, I love her skate night poem, and that, like, I was picturing it very shadowy and everything in the rink, and then her other poems as well. So I know that we don't want to veer too Halloweeny, so that's a concern, but it is fall and it's the season of shadows, I think, more so even than winter. So we're going to look at a poem. I don't have it written right in front of me, so you're going to have to help me out. Usually I do.
It's just very simply, it is a poem that features a shadow. So that's how we phrase it. But I think a great thing to point out, because all of her poems, is true, are sort of like viewing things from the shadows, you know, and like, it is a really interesting perspective, and I don't know, and then the podcast too, for that matter. So it's an interesting thing to note. Yeah.
So it's a simple prompt. So I'm looking for people to really go crazy with it. Like, it also makes me think of a supermarket in California, how it's, you know, he talks about, Ginsberg talks about Whitman as adding shade to shade, like a ghost in the shade and things like that. So there are a lot of different ways you can go with it. So go somewhere weird. Don't just give me a poem that's like under a tree, please.
Only the shadow knows for sure. Don't do that. But
don't do that.
Well, that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, it is a nice open-ended one to start off the month of November. And just a reminder how it works is, so this is for November, the submissions for the prompt poem of the month. So it's like, it's a November, what's it going to be, 5th? Yeah, November 6th episode. So so those will be for the prompt poem of the month of November, which we publish in December. And the October ones, which include the fear one and the last 5, all of them, are for the month of October, which we publish in November. Which, see, these months are so confusing. I'm trying to elaborate, but
it is a little confusing. They're due at the end of the month. There is a batch of them due tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting
We
to.
can say that. That's the important thing.
Yeah, so if you've written one in the last 5 episodes, because there are 5 episodes in October, submit them by tomorrow night at midnight, and then you can have them considered by Katie for the prompt poem of the month. So thanks, Katie, for doing that as always. It's really fun. And it's added a lot to the show, to the point where we're going to focus the open lines on prompt poems, because it's just, there's so many great ones, and it sort of gets this feel of everybody doing the same thing I really like. And it's really nice. And I think we're just going to stick stick with the news poems at the beginning of the show, and then we'll move into the sort of community poems. I think that's a better feel. I like it. I love that we have enough great poems that we can do it.
Yeah, we have like too many great poems even, which is a wonderful problem to have, right?
It really is. And I should say too, we accepted, on the first month of the prompt poems, which was August, I think, which we published in September, we published 2 additional poems that are going to be forthcoming in Rattle in the summer issue. So there was the Wayfarer one, which everyone's had to wait for, and then the Daffodils. Speaking of fun poems, so we're just cranking out great poems. So it's a really wonderful project and a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is wonderful, and that's great with picking them up for the print issue. Those poems, I think everybody's really going to love them. I love them instantly, so I'm really excited.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks, Katie. It's always a pleasure. We'll see you later, and thanks for doing it all.
Thank you for doing it all, Tim.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, so it's Katie Dozier, our prompt poems editor. Now, really quick, let's wrap up with the Sciku. And the Sciku for this week is the following, if I could click a link properly. The Sciku is based on this story from the University of Bonn, or Bonn, I guess you'd say. Or, I don't know. I don't know where it is. Denmark? Anyway, here is the story. And it is the ego consciousness of the unfeathered fowl, a study by researchers at the universities of Bonn and Bochum suggests that roosters might recognize themselves in the mirror. And so, I mean, basically the story is, and always they have the text too big, but this idea of if you have like a self-awareness is something that they can test in animals. And usually what they do is they put a dot on the animal's head, like a bear or a dog or something, and then show it in the mirror. And if they scratch at that thing, the dot, they'll be like, oh, it knows that the dot is on its head, not on the other thing's head in the mirror. So it knows it's like itself. But you can't do that with a lot of animals that don't like scratch at themselves and things like that. So it's a hard thing to study. So what they did is they had a really clever thing. So roosters, apparently, they have a special crow if a predator bird is around, like a bird of prey. And they only do it when there's other roosters around or other chickens around as well, because there's no point in calling out a warning if you don't have anybody to warn. And if you're calling out a warning with nobody there, then you're just like saying, hey, hawk, I'm right here, come eat me. So there's no benefit but a big loss. So they wouldn't crow, they'd stay silent if there are no other roosters around. So what they did is they put a mirror up there, and just the rooster, a mirror, and a hawk, and they see if the roosters crowed out their warning, if there was a mirror of themselves present, and they mostly did not. They crowed much less their warning sign if there was a mirror present that was them versus another rooster. And so that shows, possibly, unless there's some weird thing going on, that roosters have some sense of self, actually. There's a way to figure that out. Pretty interesting research from the University of Bonn. And here is our quick little Sciku based on that. I tried to go for something Halloweenish and a vibe too. In the mirror, a chicken with its head cut off. In the mirror, a chicken with its head cut off. That is the Sciku for this week. That is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody. It's been a really wonderful one. I look forward to the Halloween ones every year because I like I said, I like the creepy stuff. It's really fun to me as an entertainment. And it was really fun doing this episode. Christina Kallery was really cool with her Shadowland podcast. Everybody should check that out. And great prompt poems as well. And spooky poems for the open lines. Now, next week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be Jamaica Baldwin. Jamaica has been Poetry Spawn, is a wonderful poet. Her book coming out is Bone Language. I'm really looking forward to this episode, Rattlecast number 218, with your poems that feature a shadow for the prompt. And again, we're only doing prompt poems from now on the open lines. It's the prompt lines. So looking forward to that. And we'll have Jamaica Baldwin, Rattlecast 218, Monday, November 6th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I will talk to you later. Good night.